günahdır. Dünyada, xüsusilə də yaxın şərqdə, İran, Livan, Fələstin və Qəzzada, eləcə də Ukraynada sayı gedərək artan faciələrin miqyası dəhşət vericidir. Bugün biz Yaradanımızın insan qurbanına son qoyduğu mübarək Qurban Bayramının ərəfəsində bütün dünya ictimaiyyətini silahların susturulması və sülhün və əmin-amanlığın bərqərarı naminə səylərimizi birləşdirməyə çağırırıq. Azərbaycan hərbi cinayətlərə, insan qırğınına, soyqırıma məruz qalmış ölkədir. Şükürlər olsun müzəffər Ali Başkomandanımız, Azərbaycan Prezidenti İlham Əliyev cənablarının liderliyi ilə dünya birliyi tərəfindən tanınan ərazi bütövlüyümüzü və suverenliyimizi tam bərpa etdik və bugün azad olunmuş torpaqlarımızda geniş miqyaslı bərpa və qurucu işləri aparılır. Müsəlman, Xristiyan və digər dinlərə aid məbədlərə yeni həyat verir, mədəni mənəvi irsimizi dirçəldir, şəhərlərimizi yenidən inşa edir, regionda sülh və tərəqqi layihələrinin təşəbbüskarı kimi çıxış edirik. Ədalətin bərqərar edilməsində qardaş Türk xalqı və onun lideri cənab Rəcəb Tayyib Erdoğan başda olmaqla bizə dəstək olan bütün dost, qardaş ölkələrə xalqım, müsəlmanlar adından minnətdarlığımızı hər zamanki kimi bugün də ifadə edirəm. Hər bir xalqın və dövlətin işıqlı gələcəyi onun öndərinin müdrikliyinə və sülh məramına bağlıdır. Yüce Rəbbimizə dualar edirik ki, müdrik və sülhsevər liderlər Allahın köməyi ilə dünyamızı sülhə və əmin-amanlığa aparacaqdır inşallah. Möhtərəm tədbir iştirakçıları, dünyanın 50-dən çox ölkəsindən siyasətçiləri, diplomatları, dini liderləri, ictimai və elm xadimlərini bir araya gətirən Avrasya coğrafiyasında sülh quruculuğuna töhfə vermək məqsədini daşıyan Avrasya İqtisadi Zirvesi həqiqətən çox önəmli bir platformadır. Uca Allah'tan Marmara Grubu Vakfı'nın bu global əhəmiyyətli təşəbbüsünə xeyir dualar diləyirəm. Zirvənin uğuru üçün gecəsini gündüzünə qatan əziz qardaşım, möhtərəm Akkansuver cənablarına, Marmara Qrupunun bütün dəyərli mənsublarına dərin təşəkkürümü bildirirəm. Ulu Tanrı yardımcınız olsun. Amin. Vesselamu aleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuhu.
Muhterem hocam, oradan ayrılmıyorsunuz. Sizi bir dakika orada tutuyoruz. Bir dakika. Sayın Şeyhülislam Hazretleri'ne çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Yaptığı veciz konuşmalarından dolayı. Şimdi Kuzey Makedonya Maliye Bakan Yardımcısı Sayın Yanklovski'yi davet ediyorum. His Excellency Nikolay Yanklovski, Deputy Minister of Finance of North Macedonia.
Honorable Excellencies, esteemed Presidents, Ministers, Ambassadors, Members of Parliaments, dignitaries from the religious communities, dear participants of this summit. Allow me first and foremost to extend my sincere appreciation to Dr. Akan Suvar, Mr. Sejin Bilgic, the presidency of the Marmara Group Foundation and the whole team for the excellent organization of the 29th Euro-Asian Economic Summit and for the opportunity for the Republic of Macedonia to be a part for this important international dialogue, which has already established a long-standing tradition. It is a particular honor to address you today within the session dedicated to global responsibility and the challenges facing the modern world. The theme, living on a planet where water and green are depleting, is not merely an environmental issue, but an existential challenge that has a profound impact on economic stability, energy security, public finances, and the future of our societies. Today, we live in a period of serious global transformation. Over the past years, the world has faced a pandemic, an energy crisis, inflationary pressures, geopolitical conflicts, and climate change. All these developments have had a direct impact on economies and on the quality of life of citizens around the world. In such circumstances, marked by prolonged and continuous crises that have placed significant pressure on public finances, the responsibility of governments becomes even greater. The key challenge is to maintain a careful balance between addressing immediate needs and ensuring long-term fiscal consolidation and stability. My government remains firmly committed to preserving macroeconomic stability, fiscal discipline, and sustainable economic development. In this context, the Ministry of Finance plays a central role in shaping policies that ensure a stable budget, support economic growth, and create investments for the future. The budget is not merely a financial document. It is an instrument for development, an instrument for social stability, and an instrument for creating better opportunities for citizens and businesses alike. This is precisely why we are implementing a new model of economic development based on investments, both public and private. In recent years, we have invested significant resources in capital investments, infrastructure, energy, digitalization, education, and the green transition. Particular attention is being devoted to energy independence and investments in renewable energy sources because We firmly believe that the green economy is the economy of the future. At the same time, the Ministry of Finance is actively advancing reforms aimed at strengthening public finances, modernizing the tax system, increasing transparency, and digitalizing financial services. Our objective is to build a resilient economy capable of successfully responding to future global shocks. In these efforts, international partnerships is of essential importance because no country today can overcome these challenges alone. This kind of cooperation clearly demonstrates that solidarity and partnership remain the strongest response to global crisis. As a candidate country for membership in the European Union, Macedonia remains committed to European values, reforms, and regional cooperation. We strongly believe that a stable and economically interconnected region is a prerequisite for long-term peace, stability, and prosperity. Dear all, today we cannot speak about economic growth without speaking about stability. We cannot speak about the future without investing in younger generations. And we cannot speak about global stability without mutual trust and cooperation. Euro-Asia possesses enormous potential. This region can serve as a bridge between continents, economies, and cultures. However, this potential can only be realized through dialogue, partnership, and shared responsibility. Allow me, in conclusion, to once again express my sincere gratitude to the organizers for their vision and dedication. I am convinced that summits such as this create ideas and partnerships that contribute to a more peaceful, more stable, and more prosperous world. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Minister. Cafer Bey. Cafer Bey. Söz sırası şimdi Ekümenik Patrik Bartolomeos Hazretleri'nde. Now I invite His All Holiness Patriarch Ekümenik Bartolomeos.
Good morning, everybody. Your Excellencies, dear Dr. Akkan Suver, distinguished organizers and speakers, esteemed participants, dear friends. Could we imagine waking one morning to discover a world where rivers no longer flow, forests no longer breathe, and the heavens no longer give rain? Could we imagine a planet where darkness replaces light and the song of birds is silenced? Such a vision is not merely science fiction nor a distant possibility. It is the warning our planet addresses to us each day. Therefore, the question before us is not only scientific, economic, or technological. It is also profoundly spiritual and moral. How shall we live when the very breath of creation begins to fade? What answer shall we give to our children and to their children if through indifference, greed, or inaction we diminish the sources of life? Water and greenery are not simply natural resources. They belong to the grammar of life itself. Every living being, from the smallest seed to the greatest creature of the sea, depends upon them. Water nourishes, cleanses, heals, and renews. The green world gives shade, breath, beauty, and fruitfulness. Together, they reveal the deep interdependence of all that exists. In Holy Scripture, water is present at the very dawn of creation. The Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters. It is the womb of creation, the primordial sign of life, blessing, and renewal. In the Orthodox Christian tradition, therefore, the created world is never regarded as profane or disposable. It is sacred, relational, and held in trust for all generations. This conviction is expressed with particular beauty each year at the Fanar during the Feast of Theophany, when we commemorate Christ's baptism and bless the waters of the Golden Horn, proclaiming anew that water and through water all creation is entrusted to humanity not for exploitation, but for reverence and care. To pollute water is to wound the fabric of life. To destroy forests is to deprive the earth of its lungs, its splendor, and its capacity to sustain future generations. In the language of the Psalms, trees themselves appear as signs of blessing, abundance, and praise. A world without greenery would not only be poorer in resources, it would be poorer in hope. Our planet suffers from more than physical drought. It suffers from a drought of wisdom, sobriety, and solidarity. Humanity has too often turned the waters of life into commodities and transformed forests into instruments of profit. We have forgotten that creation is a gift to be received with gratitude, shared with justice, and preserved with reverence. At an economic summit, it is necessary to speak frankly about the meaning of prosperity. Prosperity cannot be measured only by production, consumption, expansion, or profit. A society is not truly wealthy if its rivers are poisoned, its forests are disappearing, its soil is exhausted, and its poorest communities are left without clean water or breathable air. No economy can flourish by exhausting the foundations on which it depends. Water, soil, forests, and air are not externalities. They are the living basis of every society. No model of development can be called successful if it consumes the very sources that make human flourishing possible. We have often emphasized that the destruction of the natural world is not only an environmental error or an economic miscalculation. It is also a moral and spiritual failure. Indeed, what our tradition dares to call a sin. When we destroy creation, we violate the relationship between humanity and the divine, between person and neighbor, between heaven and earth, and between the present generation and those yet to come. The ecological crisis is therefore a crisis of the human heart. It reveals a distorted way of seeing the world, as though nature were merely raw material. Water could be possessed without responsibility, forests replaced by concrete without consequence, and the earth itself treated as disposable. Yet, a planet without water and greenery would not only be lifeless, it would be loveless. For where there is no reverence, there can be no true justice, and where there is no gratitude, there can be no lasting peace. The theme of this summit speaks of dialogue, dialogue for the water and the green of our planet. Dialogue does not begin with speaking, but with listening. It requires humility, attention, patience, and the willingness to be changed by what we hear. We often speak of dialogue among peoples, cultures, religions, and nations. Today, however, we are also called to listen to creation itself. In the language of the prophets, even mountains, hills, and trees join in praise, as though the world possesses a voice that humanity must learn to hear. Creation is speaking, warning, praising, and pleading. The decisive question is whether we are prepared to listen. In the spiritual tradition of the Church, this attentiveness teaches us to perceive divine beauty and grace in all things. Every act of reverence toward creation, whether great or small, becomes a form of prayer. Conserving water, protecting forests, refusing waste, restoring polluted places, and defending vulnerable communities are not merely technical actions. They are acts of responsibility before God, before one another, and before the earth that sustains us. This is why ecological responsibility cannot be separated from social justice. The poor suffer first from pollution, drought, deforestation, and climate instability. Communities that have contributed least to environmental destruction often bear its heaviest burden. To protect the waters and forests of our planet is therefore to defend human dignity, peace, health, food, future generations, and the common home of the entire human family. There can be no authentic development without justice, no lasting growth without restraint, no peaceful future if the blessings of creation are hoarded by some and denied to others. The waters and forests of our planet are not luxuries, they are the shared inheritance of humanity. Dear friends, to live on a planet without water and greenery is to live without blessing, beauty, and hope. Yet such a fate is not inevitable. We still have time to turn the desert into a garden, provided that we learn again to love what God has made and to respect what has been given to us. The call before us is clear. We must choose life over death, reverence over indifference, moderation over excess, and communion over isolation. When we protect a river, we protect the soul of a community. When we plant a tree, we make an act of hope. When we share these gifts justly, we become humble co-workers in the preservation of life. May this summit inspire courageous reflection, sincere dialogue, and concrete action. May it strengthen the bonds among all who labor for the protection of our planet. And may it remind us that the economy exists for life, not life for the economy. Let the waters flow with purity. Let the trees once more stand as signs of life. Let our economies serve creation rather than consume it. And let humanity rediscover the path of gratitude, restraint, and reverence before the miracle of creation. We thank you very much for your kind attention.
Patrik Hazretleri, oradan ayrılmıyorsunuz. Bir dakika sizi tutuyoruz. Patrik Hazretlerine teşekkür ederken heyetinizle paylaşmak istediğim bir havadisim de var. Patrik Bartolomeos dünyanın önemli ilim kuruluşlarından biri olan Akademi Fransız'e üye kabul edildi. Türkiye'den ilk defa bir bilim, ilim ve din adamı olarak Patrik Bartolomeos Akademi Fransız'da üyedir. Kendisinin bu haberini de yüksek heyetinize duyurmak isterim. Tebrikler saygıdeğer Patrik Hazretleri. Efendim, şimdi söz sırası Türkiye'nin önceki Diyanet İşleri Başkanlarından Profesör Doktor Ali Bardakoğlu'nda. Now I invite here His Holiness Professor Dr. Ali Bardakoğlu, former President of the Religious Affairs of Turkey.
Evet, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allah'a hamd ederek Hazreti Adem'den Hazreti İbrahim'e, Hazreti Musa'ya, Hazreti İsa'ya ve Hazreti Muhammed'e kadar bütün peygamberlere sayısız salat ve selam ederek sözlerime başlıyorum. Saygıdeğer divan ve değerli katılımcılar, hepinizin huzurunda Doktor Akkan Süver'e ve Marmara grubuna şükranlarımı ve tebriklerimi arz etmek istiyorum. Çünkü çok zor başarılan bir şeyi büyük bir diplomatik nezaketle yıllardır başarıyor, yıllardır sürdürüyor ve bugün 29. zirvedeyiz. Avrasya Ekonomi Zirvesi'nin 29. zirvesindeyiz ve ülkemizin, dünyanın, insanlığın el yakan sorunlarını, kördüğüm olmuş meselelerini tartışıyoruz, konuşuyoruz. İnsanlığın karşı karşıya kaldığı krizleri konuşuyoruz, çıkış yollarını araştırıyoruz. Evet, bunlar insanoğlunun yeryüzü macerasının yansımalarıdır. Çok da karamsar olmaya, ümitsiz olmaya gerek yok. Savaşlar, açlıklar, kıtlıklar, salgınlar, depremler, doğanın tahrip edilmesi, su kıtlığı, yeşilin tahribi, birlikte yaşıyoruz. Birlikte bu sorunları aşmaya çalışıyoruz. Neler yapabiliriz'i konuşuyoruz. Ama bunun yanı sıra umut verici gelişmeler de oluyor. Bilimde, işbirliğinde, paylaşımda. Peki bir şey sorayım. Bu sorunların için çözemiyoruz. O kadar konuşuyoruz ama çözemiyoruz. Sorunlar hala bütün şiddetiyle varlığını bazen de artarak katmerli hale gelerek devam ediyor. Ben üniversiteye intisap edeli 50 yıl oldu. 50 yılı geçtim. Araştırma görevliliğine ve ilim dünyasına aidiyetimin 50. yılındayım. 8 yıl kadar da Diyanet İşleri Başkanlığı yaptım. Din camiasını da tanıma imkanı buldum. Ve bir şey öğrendim değerli dostlar. Bütün bunlar insan gerçeğinin etrafında olup biten hadiseler. Yeryüzünde ne olup bitiyorsa emin olun hepsi insan gerçeği etrafında oluşuyor. Zaten Yüce Yaratan da dini insan gerçeğine göre ve dünya hayatı serüvenine göre gönderdi. İşte burada din, iş, siyaset, ilim, bürokrasi insanları, aydınlar, sanatkarlar bir aradayız. Öyle olunca ben biraz genel çerçevenin birkaç cümle arz edeyim sizlere. Din, Hazreti Adem'den Hazreti Muhammed'e kadar bütün peygamberlerin, kutlu elçilerin anlattığı din, insanın yeryüzü macerasına yönelik bir hidayettir, bir aydınlatmadır, bir rehberliktir. Ve ben biraz ödevimi çalıştım Hakan Bey. Bütün dinlerin, bütün peygamberlerin söylediklerini şu 6 noktada toplayabiliriz diye düşünüyorum. 1. Yüce Yaratıcı'yı tanıyın, sevin ve ona bağlı olun. Yeryüzünü onun egemenliği altında yaşayın. 2. İnsanlığın ürettiği, vicdanında seslendirdiği bütün ahlaki, insani değerlere sahip çıkın. Onlar sizin öz değerlerinizdir. 3. Bu değerlere sahip çıkmayı hayatınızda gösterin. Hayatınıza yansıtın. Onu davranış çizginiz yapın. Çünkü değerli dostlar, din bir bilgi değil, bir bilinç kaynağıdır. Din bir eğitimdir, irade eğitimidir. Bilmek değil, yapmaktır. Onun için de bütün peygamberlerin çağrısının şu 2 noktada toplandığını görürüz. 1, Rabbinizi tanıyın. 2, dosdoğru bir hayat yaşayın. İstikamet üzere yaşayın. 4. Ana ilke paylaşın. Nimetleri paylaşın, acıları paylaşın, merhametli olun ve dayanışma içinde olun. 5. ilke, bütün insanların, tabiatın, doğanın, Tanrı'nın haklarına karşı saygılı olun. İnsan hakları, kadın hakları, çocuk hakları, çevre, su, yeşillik, doğa hepsi emanettir ve bunların haklarını ayrı ayrı gözetmek gerekir. 6. ana ilkede bütün işleriniz barışçıl ve yararlı olsun. İslam dininde buna salih amel denir. Yararlı iş yapın, insanlığa faydalı, insanların hayrına işler üretin. Böyle olduğu için de dindarlık, hangi dinden olursa olsun, dindarlık Allah'a, insanlara ve tabiata karşı samimiyettir, dürüstlüktür. Öyleyse bizim iyiliği öne çıkarmamız, dürüst olmamız, öz eleştiri yapmamız ve insanlara, doğaya, Tanrı'ya karşı ödevlerimizde daha sorumlu davranmamız gerekiyor. Aşırı iyimserlik ve aşırı karamsarlık doğru değildir. Onlara yeri yoktur. İyiler ve kötüler dünya kuruldu kurulalı bir arada yaşayacaktır. Ben yine bunu öğrendim. İnsanlığın tarihini, dinlerin tarihini, savaşların tarihini gördüğümüzde iyinin ve kötünün bir arada yaşamakta olduğunu görüyoruz. Hatta bir şey ifade edeyim, bizim iç dünyamızda bile iyi ve kötü duygular bir arada yaşamaktadır. Önemli olan kötü duyguları bastırabilmek ve iyi duygularımızı öne çıkarabilmek ve onları davranışlarımıza yansıtabilmektir. Böyle olunca sizler ve bizler, her birimiz kan dökenden, savaşandan, acı üretenden yana olamayız. Her birimiz iyiden, doğrudan, güzelden, haklıdan yana olmak zorundayız. Duamız bu olmalıdır. Sözlerimi şöyle bitireyim izin verirseniz. İyi olmak pasif değil, aktif bir duruştur. İyi olmak söz değil, eylemdir. İyi olmak paylaşmaktır, yararlı iş yapmaktır. Retorik değil, yararlı iş işlemedir. Zaten değerli dostlar, Yüce Tanrı ve peygamberler söylenmesi gereken güzel sözleri söylemişlerdir. Size ve bize düşen onları söylemek değil, onları hayata geçirmektir. Hepinize saygılar sunuyorum efendim.
Hocam ayrılmıyorsunuz. Teşekkür ediyoruz güzel konuşmanız için. Bir saat. Sayın Profesör Doktor Ali Bardakoğlu'na heyetimiz adına teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz. Veciz konuşmalarından dolayı. Şimdi söz sırası Monsenyör Orhan Çanlı'da. Türkiye Süryani Katolik Patrik Vekili Sayın Orhan Çanlı.
Sayın katılımcılar, muhterem dini liderler, hanımefendiler ve beyefendiler, şahsım ve Süryani Katolik toplumu adına sizleri en derin saygı ve sevgilerimle selamlıyorum. Günümüz dünyasında savaşlar, bölgesel ihtilaflar, terör, yoksulluk ve zorunlu göç hareketleriyle birlikte çevresel krizin giderek derinleştiği bu sıkıntılı süreçte 29. Avrasya Ekonomi Zirvesi'nin titizlikle düzenlenmesinde emeği geçen başta Vakıf Genel Başkanı Sayın Doktor Akkan Süver Bey'e ve tüm çalışma arkadaşlarına teşekkürlerimi sunmak istiyorum. 21. yüzyıl insanlık tarihinin en karmaşık krizlerini aynı anda yaşamaktadır. Savaş tehditleri ve artan göç dalgaları, iklim değişikliği, su kıtlığı, ve çölleşme ile birleşerek küresel bir istikrarsızlık ortamı yaratmaktadır. Bu bağlamda çevresel kriz yalnızca bilimsel bir mesele değil, aynı zamanda etik ve teolojik bir sorudur. Katolik Kilisesi, çevre sorunlarını ortak evimiz olarak tanımladığı dünya bağlamında ele almakta ve insanlığın kolektif sorunlarına vurgu yapmaktadır. Özellikle merhum Papa Franciscus tarafından yayınlanan Laudato Si genelgesi, kilisenin çevre konusundaki öğretisini sistematik biçimde ortaya koymaktadır. Kutsal kitapta su ve yeşil, yaşamın genel temel unsurları olarak sunulur. Yaratılış anlatısında Allah'ın düzen verdiği ilk unsurlardan biri sudur. Su hem biyolojik hem ruhsal yaşamın sembolüdür. Yeni ahitte vaftiz sakramenti aracılığıyla su, arınma ve yeniden doğuş anlamı kazanır. Yeşil ise bereketi ve Allah'ın yaratıcı gücünü temsil eder. Mezmurlarda doğanın Allah'a yücelttiği ifade edilir. Bu anlayış, doğanın kutsallık taşıdığı ve korunması gerektiği yönünde teolojik bir temel oluşturur. Katolik Kilisesi katekizmi, insanın yaratılış üzerindeki sorumluluğunu açıkça belirtir. İnsan, doğa üzerinde mutlak bir sahip değil, emanetçi konumundadır. Bu anlayış, çevresel sömürünün ahlaki bir sorun olduğunu ortaya koyar. Papa II. Johannes Paulus, 1990 Dünya Barış Günü mesajında çevre tahribatını barışa yönelik bir tehdit olarak tanımlamıştır. Papa 16. Benediktus ise çevre krizini ahlaki bir mesele olarak değerlendirmiştir. Bu perspektif suyun azalması ve yeşilin yok olmasını yalnızca doğal bir süreç değil, insanın etik sorumluluğunun ihlali olarak görür. Laudato Si, Katolik Kilisesi'nin çevre öğretisinin en kapsamlı belgesidir. Papa Franciscus bu metinde şu temel noktalara dikkat çeker. Temiz içme suyuna erişim temel bir insan hakkıdır. Çevresel kriz ile yoksulluk arasında doğrudan bir bağlantı vardır. Aşırı tüketim kültürü hem doğayı hem insanı sömürmektedir. Ekolojik dönüşüm bireysel ve toplumsal bir gerekliliktir. Belgede suyun özelleştirilmesi ve kirletilmesi sert biçimde eleştirilmekte, özellikle yoksul bölgelerde su krizinin insan onurunu tehdit ettiği vurgulanmaktadır. Su kıtlığı ve çölleşme tarımsal üretimi düşürmekte, bu durum işsizlik, yoksulluk ve zorunlu göçe yol açmaktadır. Caritas International gibi Katolik kuruluşlar su projeleri ve sürdürülebilir kalkınma çalışmalarıyla bu krize müdahale etmektedir. Bu yaklaşım küresel sorumluluğun pratik yansımasıdır. 2019 Amazon Sinodu sürecinde ekolojik günah kavramı tartışılmıştır. Bu kavram, doğaya verilen zararın Allah'ın yaratılışına karşı işlenen bir ihlal olduğunu ifade eder. Çözüm, yalnızca teknik değil, ruhsal bir dönüşümü de gerektirir. Tüketim alışkanlıklarının gözden geçirilmesi, israfın azaltılması ve sürdürülebilir yaşam biçimlerinin benimsenmesi, Katolik çevre etiğinin temel unsurlarıdır. Katolik Kilisesi'nin su ve yeşile ilişkin yaklaşımı çevresel bir hassasiyetin ötesinde teolojik ve ahlaki bir sorumluluk anlayışına dayanmaktadır. Su, yaşamın ve lütfun sembolü. Yeşil ise Allah'ın yaratıcı bereketinin göstergesidir. Bu nedenle çevrenin korunması, insan onurunun ve sosyal adaletin korunmasıyla doğrudan ilişkilidir. Küresel sorumluluk, devletlerin, kurumların ve bireylerin ortak çabasını gerektirir. Katolik öğretisine göre çevreyi korumak hem iman hem insanlık görevidir. Papa 14. Leon'un 11 Haziran 2026'da dünya barışı için söylediği sözleriyle konuşmama son veriyorum. Savaşın çılgınlığı sona ersin ve yeryüzü hala hayatı doğurmayı, korumayı ve sevmeyi bilenler tarafından bakılsın ve işlensin. Bizi işit ey hayatın Rabbi. Hepinize huzur, sevinç ve refah dolu bir yaşam temenni ederim saygılarımla.
Monsenyör Hazretleri ayrılmıyorsunuz. Sizi orada bir dakika tutuyoruz. Monsenyör Orhan Çanlı'ya çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi söz sırası Avusturya önceki Savunma Bakanı Sayın Werner Faslabend'te. Now I invite His Excellency former Minister of Defense of Avusturya, His Excellency Werner Faslabend.
Yeah, first of all, I really want to thank you, Dr. Hakan Suver, for providing this possibility for all of us. You and your excellent team, a great thank you, and all of us are waiting for the 30th event of this conference. I would like to make two short statements. The one due to the fact that I used to be defense minister for almost 10 years, and I'm still engaged very much in geopolitics. This is a question of the developing of the world order. We have to acknowledge that the world is going with a very fast speed out of a rule-based order into a power-based order, which means that not the rules are decisive for the behavior, but the power is the decisive factor. What is the reason? The main reason is that the three strongest global powers, America, Russia, and China, neglect, all the three of them neglect the rule-based order and go much more just into an interest-led power politics. The reason behind it is probably that we are in a phase of rivalry between especially America and China. And probably as long as the question who will be at the end the number one, who will be the state that can set the global rules, as long as this question will not be decided, the situation will not end. So far, do we have to accept it? I would say no. Because those two states, okay, they are the most powerful ones, but they are representing only round about 1/4 of the world population. 3 states out of almost 200 states. And at the other hand, also 3/4 of the population certainly need a rule-based order, because otherwise they cannot act, or they are restricted in their actions. And therefore my question is, shall we just accept it, or shall we try to change it? I would say when countries, let me just name a few ones, like Canada, European Union as a whole, Turkey, India, Japan, Brazil, and half a dozen or a dozen other countries are ready to stand up and also ask for a rule-based behavior for the three most powerful ones, this should have an effect. We just don't have to accept it by all means. Okay, this was my statement number 1. The second one is, of course, also the question of water and greenery. I prepared a few pictures. Do we want a world like this, life on a planet without water and greenery? For sure, no. If we are looking at the map, not the whole world, but more or less the region around the Mediterranean, you can see that we have immense losses of precipitation since 1900. And it is especially the region around the Mediterranean that has suffered. This is here in Spain and Portugal. This is even in the islands in northern Italy. It is very hard here in southeastern Europe. It is also in Turkey, alongside the Mediterranean coast, and it is the toughest situation over here in the east of the Mediterranean. You can see it here. This means this is the highest loss of precipitation in the last 100 years. And I want just to make a remark on the influence of demography, because this is something where we can act maybe on. And if we look, to the situation, how will be the development of the population and the need for more water in the coming years, you have to say, okay, if we look to southeastern Europe, eastern and southeastern Europe, there will not be a bigger problem, probably. Why? Because we have a depopulation, and this will mean, that people, principally will not need so much more water in the coming years. If we go further on and look at the situation in the Middle East, here you have just a few numbers, and this means, as you can see here in Turkey, this means until 2050, population will increase, probably, this is a UN forecast, around about 4 million plus 3.5 million. But if you look to the other countries, you can see, okay, the biggest problem in the region certainly will be Egypt. Egypt with a plus of more than 40 million people until 2050. And if you know that they are linked with Sudan and Ethiopia, and you take the 3 countries together, you can see that there will be a plus between 100 30 and 190 million people, and all of them will need water. I think the Egyptians are aware of it. Whether all the others are aware of it, I don't know. But also for Turkey and its immediate neighbors, this certainly will mean quite a challenge. Why? Because if you look to the situation in Iraq, Iraq now has 48 million inhabitants. This means until 2050, the population of Iraq will be 50% higher than now. And even in Syria, you can see it, 12 million more. And the same also in the smaller countries like Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and so on. And insofar, the big question will be, what can we do in order to manage it? And there are, of course, three main provider groups. This is industry, agriculture, and households. Industry, this is a controlled area. There's not very much to change. Agriculture will be decisive because we still have the old methods and an enormous waste of water. And what I would see is, what we can do when there will be a plan for reconstruction in Syria. We also can try that part of it should be the question of water, the question of teaching also the farmers over there how to save water and also to provide them with the necessary instruments. Insofar, this is not a question. The second big group, of course, are the households, because all of us, we have changed our habits. When I was a child, I don't know, take a shower once a week at the best, now every day. And I think this happens in many households. And it's a question of living standard. Even the upper middle class now. Everybody who has a garden also tries to have a swimming pool or something like that. And insofar, we can manage it. But this means that water responsibility is not only at the international level, it is also at the national level and at the local level. And this, having in our consciousness, can tell us we can do something. Just take the problems, look forward, try what is the reason, what can we do in order to stop it. Because one of the most important questions for everybody in 2050 will be the access to water. And I would say everybody has a right to have access to water. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, dear Minister. Now I invite from United States of America, Professor Dr. Cole Durham. Professor Dr. Durham.
First, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to take part in this important conference. I welcome in particular the opportunity to be in Turkey once again and to reflect on the themes of this conference. I also stand on the existing protocol in terms of recognizing everyone else and expressing thanks. I am here as president of the G20 Interfaith Forum Association. For convenience, I will refer to this simply as IF20, short for Interfaith 20 or Multi-Faith 20. This name is analogous to that of various formal G20 engagement groups that have grown up as a system of stakeholders that brings specialized experience in guiding global processes. This includes groups such as the B20 for business, the L20 for labor, the U20 for urban affairs, the W20 for women, the Y20 for youth, and numerous others, including numerous environmental sensitive groups. The IF20 is not a formal engagement group, but because of the strength of its connections to religious groups, it is often treated as one, as a comparable stakeholder. For the past 12 years, our organization has held forum events to contribute to recommendations coming from each of the G20 summit host countries. Thus, we held a conference in Istanbul in 2015 when Turkey was the G20 host country. In addition to each year's G20 Interfaith Forum, we hold various other events, webinars, seminars, and so forth, and impact sessions aimed at demonstrating what faith in action can do. Our focus has moved beyond dialogue to diapraxis, that is, to finding ways that various religious communities can not only come to know each other better, but can actually work together in ways that solve real-world problems, such as those we've been discussing here. Our mission is to provide thought leadership on global policy questions where religious communities' unique insights demonstrate how faith can be put into action for the common good. By mobilizing an international network of faith leaders around the G20 process, the IF20 highlights practical solutions to care for the vulnerable. Because the United States is the G20 host country this year, we will hold our main forum in my home state in Salt Lake City, Utah. The opening ceremony will be a combined session with global religious leaders addressing common concerns, complemented by a concert of the internationally famous Mormon Tabernacle Choir. The closing session will be held in the Roman Catholic Cathedral of the Madeleine and will feature a handover to next year's local organizing chair of IF20 events planned for the United Kingdom. That is, Lord Russell Rook of the UK House of Lords will be with us representing the UK at that time. He will speak at the Utah Forum outlining the Faith in Action campaign that is already underway and centered in the UK. For those of you who would recognize, and it's alluded to by the tripartite leadership that you just mentioned, there are some problems, and we are looking forward to making it through the U.S. year, and we're looking forward to what other countries will do in working on restoring the rule-based order, and we apologize in the meantime. But between the two events that I just described, we are planning 20 substantive sessions that will help focus on the way that religious communities can help identify concrete recommendations and can contribute to actual implementation of broader G20 and global policies. Priority impact areas will include the fight against hunger, global efforts to reduce trafficking and modern forms of slavery, efforts to advance health care, environmental action on many fronts, including those the focus here, religious freedom, and a variety of other areas where G20 policies can advance the common good. We are conscious that we live at a time of conflict and polycrises. The multilateral order on which we have depended to stabilize and order global economic affairs seems to be unraveling. On every front, global leaders are looking for ways to reorder the landscape in which we live. My own hope is that it will not be merely power politics, but this is something for all of us to work on. This includes concerns about global warming, concerns for distribution of water resources and protection of rainforests and other green spaces. That has been a major focus here. And it includes a variety of related issues, such as the debt crisis, women's empowerment, the uncertain implications of the new world of artificial intelligence, and the challenges that will face women and families. In this context, I want to make one simple point. Whatever new structures appear, whatever new structures emerge to deal with global challenges, it will be a mistake not to involve religious communities in finding answers. The best empirical evidence we have gathered over the past 2 decades confirms that protecting the freedom of all religious groups holds the key to advancing the common good on many fronts. Religious communities are more closely involved in the actual issues people face on the ground than any other organizations. Their voices reflect the pluralism of our times, but that pluralism holds the key to peace, social integration, and involves institutions with the most extensive experience in crisis response, peace building, healthcare, education, poverty alleviation, and countless other vital social needs, such as those we're discussing here. Even more importantly, their voices are among the most trusted on earth, and they have the capacity to mobilize social capital at every level, from the global to the local. They remain in place at a time when other institutions require rethinking and restructuring, and they can play a vital role in the new social institutions that will crystallize in the near future. They hold vital keys to collaboration and finding productive solutions to many of the polycrises we face. We invite all of you at this conference to join us in exploring how much can be positively accomplished through working with the G20 process in ways that promote not only dialogue and cooperation, but diapraxis and faith in action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Rector Paul Gürhan. Şimdi söz sırası Belçika Milletvekili Sen Jose Belediye Başkanı ve eski Belçika Devlet Bakanı Sayın Emir Kır Beyefendi'de. Sayın Emir Kır. Now, His Excellency Emir Kır, Member of Parliament of Belgium.
Çok değerli konuklar, her yıl olduğu gibi bu Avrasya Ekonomi Zirvesi vesilesiyle sizlerle yeniden bir araya gelmek benim için büyük bir onurdur. Sayın Profesör Doktor Hakan Süver Bey'e ve bütün ekibine çok teşekkür ederim ve kutlarım bu güzel organizasyon için. Ayrıca bugün bizden önce konuşan, özellikle din adamlarından sonra konuşmak bir hayli zor olduğunu da itiraf etmek isterim. Bildiğiniz gibi bazı krizlerin çok öne çıktığı, bazılarının ise sessizce ilerlediği bir dönemden geçiyoruz. Su krizi de bunlardan birisidir. Dünya ölçeğinde bu kriz farklı şekillerde ortaya çıkmaktadır. Bazı ülkelerde su kirliliği, bazılarında ise sel felaketleri, diğerlerinde kirlilik, çölleşme, buzulların erimesi şeklinde karşımıza çıkmaktadır. İklim değişikliği, krizler ve savaşlar nedeniyle kırgınlıklaşan bir dünyada yaşıyoruz artık. Su sorunları daha önemli bir probleme dönüşmektedir. Su olmadığında insanlar göç etme zorunda kalıyorlar. Adil bir dağılım olmadığında ise gerilimler artıyor. Çatışmalar patlak verdiğinde altyapılar tahrip oluyor. Su artık yalnızca doğal bir kaynak değildir. O artık insan onuru, istikrar ve barış meselesi haline gelmiştir. Bugün bizi burada bir araya getiren konu da tam olarak budur. İzin verirseniz kısaca Belçika ile ilgili birkaç cümle paylaşmak isterim. Belçika'da bazen kendimizi korunmuş hissediyoruz. Sonuçta sık sık yağmur yağıyor. Ama gerçek farklıdır. Belçika aşırı su stresi yaşayan ülkeler arasında yer almaktadır. Ve hatta Kuzey Avrupa'nın bu durumda tek ülkesidir. Biz suyu tahliye etmeye dayalı bir model inşa etmişiz yıllardır. Yağmur yağdığında su hızla kanalizasyonlara, ardından da denize yönlendiriliyor. Su ne tutuluyor, ne de topraklar sulanıyor, ne de yeterince değerlendiriliyor. Dolayısıyla şu paradoksla karşı karşıyayız. Yağmur yağdığında fazla su, kurak dönemlerde ise yetersiz su. Bugün buna karşı birçok yatırımlar yapma zorunda kalacağız. Suyu düştüğü anda tutmak, eksik olduğunda korumak, kirlendiği zaman arıtmak ve adil biçimde paylaştırmak. İşte tam bu nedenle şehirler, belediyeler, yerel yönetimler çok büyük önem taşımaktadır. Çünkü çözümlerin çoğu zaman bir şehirde, bir belediyede, bir mahallede, bir sokakta, bir okulda veya bir konutta başlamaktadır. Brüksel'in merkezinde en yoğun nüfuslu belediye olan Saint-Just Belediyesi bu meseleleri aynı şekilde yaşıyoruz. Bu durum karşısında önemli bir iklim planımız çerçevesinde net bir siyasi tercih yaptık. Suyu tutmamız gerekiyor, yeniden kullanmamız gerekiyor ve iyi değerlendirmemiz gerekiyor. Bu bölgemizde aşamalı bir şekilde bunu dönüştürmeye çalışıyoruz. Birkaç tane örneği, okul bahçelerimizi artık yeşillendiriyoruz. Kamusal alanlarımızı suyu geçirgen hale getiriyoruz. Binalarımızı yağmur suyu depolarıyla donatıyoruz. Aynı şekilde bütün vatandaşlarımızı teşvik ediyoruz. Toplanan bu su daha sonra özellikle yeşil alanlara sulanmasında kullanılıyor. Tüm bu çabalarımızın ortak amacı, yağmur suyunun artık bir atık değil, bir kaynak haline getirilmesini sağlamak. Uzun vadede ise amacımız gereksiz su kayıplarının artık olmadığı bir şehir, bir belediye modeline yönelmek. Ama özünde su meselesi bir yaşam kalitesi meselesidir. Bu yaz aylarında daha serin bir sokak demektir. Daha zengin bir biyolojik çeşitlilik demektir. Sel riskini daha az maruz kalan bir konut demektir. Daha yaşanabilir bir kamusal alan demektir. Ve aynı zamanda daha kontrollü faturalar demektir. Bizim gibi yoğun nüfuslu ve halkın yoğun yaşadığı şehirlerde bu durum doğrudan vatandaşlarımızı etkilemektedir. Bu bağlamda aynı zamanda bu mesele bir sosyal adalet meselesidir. Sözlerime basit ama önemli bir cümle ile tamamlamak istiyorum. Su sınır tanımaz. Büyük krizler zirvelerde tartışılır ise, çözümler çoğu zaman şehirlerde, belediyelerde, vatandaşlarla birlikte inşa edilir. Beni dinlediğiniz için çok teşekkür ederim.
Sayın Bakanım, biz de size çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Şimdi söz sırası Türkiye Haham Başılığı Dini Kurul üyesi Haham Doktor İzak Alaluf'ta.
Değerli hanımefendiler, beyefendiler, böylesine önemli bir konuda, böylesine önemli bir toplantıyı organize ettiğiniz ve bizleri de buna dahil ettiğiniz için hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sayın Hağambaşımız Ravda Bitsevi şu anda yurt dışında olduğundan kendisinin benden istirham ettiği duyuruyu sizlerle paylaşmak üzere huzurlarınızdayım. Değerli dostlar, şimdiye kadar konuşan kıymetli zevatın bizleri aydınlatan düşüncelerini de ilgiyle ve alakayla dinledikten sonra doğrudan konuya girecek ve güncellenip onaylanan sayılardan söz edecek olursak. Şu sıralarda yuvarlak hesap 7,8 milyar kişilik dünya nüfusunun yine ortalama şu sıralarda %13'ü temiz ve sağlıklı bir içme suyuna ulaşmaktan mahrum kalmakmıştır. Aşağı yukarı %15'i yeterli beslenme imkanlarından yoksun ve bu nüfusun yine yuvarlak hesap %48'inin günlük yaşam maliyeti sadece $2 civarındadır. Niyetimiz bir takım sayıları peş peşe dizip sizleri istatistiklerle yormak değildir elbet. Ancak günümüzde dünyamızın gerçeği maalesef bu noktadadır. Kutsal kitaplardaki metinlerden hareket ettiğimizde Yüce Tanrı'nın koruyup geliştirmesi koşuluyla insana emanet ettiği yeryüzü cenneti de onu koruyup işlemekle görevli insan nesillerinin de durumu maalesef budur. Bugün burada bir yeryüzü sakinlerinin kişi başına düşen temiz ve sağlıklı su ile yine kişi başına düşen yeşil alan ve ormanın giderek azaldığı ve yarınlara ilişkin bu konudaki öngörülerin hiç de iyimser olmadığını tartışma konusu ediniyorsak, bilelim ki tehlikeli bir sürecin tam da içinde bulunmaktayız. Bu noktaya gelindikten sonra artık bakışlarımızı geriye çevirip bu duruma gelişimizin sebeplerini sıralamanın ve karşımızda her kim varsa ona parmak sallayarak suçlamanın hiçbir yararı yoktur. Kaybedilen kaybedilmiştir. Yaşadığımız bu ihtiyar gezegende nesiller boyu sürdüre geldiğimiz bu savurgan, hatta hoyrat tahripkarlığımızın geriye döndüremesek bile, en azından şimdiden tezi yok durdurabilecek, ilahi doğal düzenin yavaşça da olsa kendini onarmasına fırsat verebilecek miyiz? Yeşili, ağacı giderek sınırsızca azdırdığımız özlemlerimize göre değil, suyu da zorunlu ve asgari ihtiyaçlarımıza göre, o da asgari düzeyde ve mümkünse birden fazla kullanmayı öğrenebilecek yeni nesilleri de bu zihniyet çerçevesinde eğitmeyi başarabilecek miyiz? Bilim ve teknolojinin sınırlarını, bu alanda mevcut kaynakların en verimli biçimde kullanılmasına, mümkün olan alanlarda geri dönüşümlük yöntemleri ötesine yönelik çalışmalara yoğunlaştırabilecek miyiz? Bu ve buna benzer önlemler alınmaz, tutumlar belirlenmez, belirlenen esaslar titizlikle takip edilmezse, merak etmeyin, bize hiçbir şey olmaz. Belki çocuklarımıza da bir şey olmaz. Oysa torunlarımız ve onların çocukları için aynı şeyleri söylemek mümkün değildir ne yazık ki. Fırsatlar henüz kaçmış değildir. Kendimize, yaşam biçimimize çeki düzen verebilir, doğaya ve tanrısal düzene saygı bir ömür sürebilir ve hiç değilse torunlarımıza ve gelecek nesillere yaşanılabilir bir dünya verebiliriz. Tabii ki bunun bir maliyeti olacaktır, bir bedeli olacaktır. Ama aksinin alternatif maliyeti, torunlarımızın ve gelecekteki insan neslini olumsuz yaşam koşullarına mahkum etmektir. Tercih bizimdir, hepimizindir. Teşekkür eder, saygılar sunarım.
Şimdi söz sırası Bosna Hersek'te. Bosna Hersek Belediye Başkanımız Sayın Ernest İmamović. Sayın Ernest İmamović.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was really interesting before me to have such a great speeches. Before I start to say something from the practical way of management of water in our city, it was a great turnout to listen the Ministry of Defense of Austria. Es war eine Ehre, ihn zu hören. He was the victim in 10 years what can happen, how the world can change, of the former Yugoslavia, of the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and what can it be from this place, what can it be in 10 years. And you mentioned our countries, actually, also Bosnia and Herzegovina. The population might be smaller, but the Chinese Americans are there on our River Drina. They produce electricity on River Drina. This is the #1 river who can supply electricity. And the citizens in our city maybe don't have so much water. And it will be real interesting to see how can be all change in 10 years. But ladies and gentlemen, in this great pleasure to greet you on behalf of the city of Gorazde and it is in city in Eastern Bosnia and Herzegovina, and on my own behalf. The topic I'm addressing today is extremely relevant, and in the time ahead, its importance will only continue to grow. The drive for economic growth and the pursuit of higher profits are leading to aggressive human and policy intervention in the exploitation of natural resources. Profit has taken or is taking precedence over environmental protection. Water and greenery are disappearing. We are witnessing an increasing number of people worldwide being left without access to clean drinking water. I believe this is an ideal platform to send a message. We advocate for economic growth in all nations, but not at the expense of destroying water sources or rivers and our green belts. Indirectly, this means not at the expense of public health. Through the development of rational public policies, this balance is possible to perhaps not at the rapid pace the business sector possibly through expense. Profit must never be placed above human health. I'm aware that raising the level of environment consequence among the population is a difficult process, but it is a process that has no viable alternative. For these reasons, as the Mayor of Gorazde, I have undertaken a series of measures and activities aimed at protecting the Drina River and establishment and center regionally landfill in our city. The importance that the city of Gorazde attached to the protection of the Drina is best illustrated by the fact that our city council has officially proclaimed March 22nd as the Day of Drina River, which will commemorate every year with various dedicated events. I must remind you that the Drina is a river in East Bosnia and Herzegovina, which in its lower course forms the natural border between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. Historically, it served as the boundary between the Eastern and Western Roman empires. It flows through many cities such as Foča, Gorazde, Višegrad, Bratunac in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Bajna Bašta, Ljubovlja, Zvornik, and Mali Zvornik in Serbia. Ladies and gentlemen, from this podium, let us raise our voice to stop the destruction of the green spaces and water sources across the globe. Using our authority and the position we hold, let us do everything in our power to halt the devastation of nature and consequently the destruction of human health. Our voice may be small, but it was a vital step toward raising global ecological awareness. And on behalf of my city, my citizens, it will be real interesting how can one city produce management such water supplying, regional depony, and these great ideas from the world leader and global leader in the way how to management on the local level be real interesting to see of the great word, big words can be practical, can be improved through our local level. Thank you once again to have this opportunity for this great place from Istanbul to have the honor to say a couple of words.
Thank you so much, dear Mayor. Cafer. Demiyorlar. Now I invite Monsignor Massimiliano Palinumoro. No. Kendileri ülkemizde Vatikan Devleti'nin...
Sorry for my so difficult name, Mr. Akan. Thank you so much for your kind invitation, and I would like to give my congratulations for this so important organization. Thank you for asking me to show the point of view of the Catholic Church about the social and economical issues of the earth in this particular moment of the world. And I would like to offer you the papal agenda for the next years, published through the apostolic exhortation of Pope Leo called Dilexite, in Latin, I have loved you. This is the first apostolic teaching of Pope Leo, and this apostolic exhortation means this first official teaching of the Pope after his election. It's clear that the papal agenda is the same of Pope Francis. This is remarkable because many supposed that after the death of Pope Francis, the Catholic Church should return in the frame of the worship, not involved in political, economic, and social topics. They are really disappointed because in the papal agenda, the first topic is the fighting against the poverty. The poor and the vulnerable are the first victims of the exploitation of the water and of the earthly resources. So the Catholic Church continues to fight against poverty and to call all the other religions, to invite all the believers to fight in the name of God against the injustice, against the exploitation of the earthly resources. In this so important apostolic exhortation, Dilexite, Pope Leo emphasizes the centrality of the preferential love for the poor. The poor and the vulnerables must be at the heart of the society and of the church because they are at the heart of God. Both Pope Francis and Pope Leo repeat the biblical admonition, do not forget the poor, do not neglect the poor. Every human development passes through the preferential option for the poor. The Pope says in this apostolic exhortation, I am convinced that the preferential option for the poor will bring about an extraordinary renewal, both in the church and in the society. In this particular historical moment, while the gap between rich and poor grows, while the world's resources are increasingly concentrated in the hands of fewer individuals, while ideologies collapse, it seems that no authority is able to protect the poor people who are even more resigned to their fate. Capitalist society needs the poor to remain poor. They are just tools to be exploited, and there is no interest in eliminating poverty. Even religions sometimes justify the status quo, imposing the idea of the legitimacy of wealth as a grace of God, a sign of God's favor and preference for certain individuals. The serious crisis of faith experienced in many countries also leads to a crisis in charitable works and to a barbarization of morality. Here lies the Pope's critic. Christians, too, in many circumstances, allow themselves to be influenced by attitudes marked by worldly ideologies and by political and economic purposes that lead to an unjust generalizations and misleading conclusions. Pope Leo reminds us there is an inseparable bond between Christian faith and the poor, which is the specific contribution of the Catholic Church against the poverty. Pope Francis repeatedly stated, I very much desire a church that is poor and for the poor. A church capable of liberating prisoners, welcoming strangers, healing the sick, educating and forming the poor, and fulfilling the mission of mercy. Some data. Today, the Catholic Church provides education to more than 70 million students through 235,000 schools and 1,200 universities. These educational centers are located particularly in impoverished regions of the world. Worldwide, the Church operates 104,000 hospitals and charitable and healthcare institutions. The source is the Church's Book of Statistics, published every year. These data are referred to 2023, the last available data. In some poorer countries, educational and healthcare systems depend on the Church's resources and support. In these centers, all forms of missionary activities are explicitly forbidden. By Christ's own command, everyone must be welcomed without distinction, for love of the poor cannot be bound by race, language, nationality, or religion. The prophet Isaiah reminds us that peace is the fruit of justice. Thus says the prophet, the work of justice will be peace. The effect of justice, calm and security forever. A world marked by selfishness and injustice, where the rights of the poor and the weak are systematically violated, can never live in peace. It is well known that religions play a crucial role in educating humanity in justice and righteousness, compassion and sharing. 2 days ago, Pope Leo, in his address at an international Christian and Muslim conference about compassion and empathy, recalled that in the Islamic tradition, Rafa, in Arabic compassion, is seen as a gift bestowed by God upon the hearts of believers. In the same way, in the biblical tradition, compassion and closeness find their origin in God's own action. The Lord said to Moses, I have seen the suffering of my people. I have heard their cry. The Pope warns that compassion, empathy, is today at risk of disappearing, suffocated by the constant flow of images and videos that show the suffering of others, but can numb our hearts instead of moving them. Compassion, empathy remains an indispensable virtue. Only if we put ourselves in the other's shoes, as they say in English, put yourself in the other's shoes, will we understand that poverty and injustice must disappear from the face of the earth. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Biraz oradan ayrılmıyorsunuz efendim. Now I invite Nicole Marie Stilling from United States of America. He is a Deputy President of the Stilling Foundation. Stilling Vakfı Başkan Yardımcısı Nicole Marie Stilling, Amerika Birleşik Devletleri.
It's a delight to be here today. Dear esteemed President, Your Excellency Dr. Akan Survey, and to all present, protocols observed, and warmly acknowledged, I thank the Marmara Foundation and my esteemed colleagues who have participated in this conference. It's a privilege to join you for the 29th Eurasia Economic Summit. The Sterling Foundation is a proud sponsor of this gathering, and especially the associated youth event, because those young people will carry forward what we commit to do here today. We are living on a planet where water is disappearing and green space is vanishing faster than our policies can respond. Governments around the world are stretched. They are managing security crises, economic pressures, and political divisions. They cannot do this alone. And frankly, waiting for them to do it alone is a luxury we no longer have. So the question that I want to put before you today is this: who shows up? I've spent years working at the intersection of international relations and philanthropy, and I'm more convinced than ever that the answer lies in genuine partnership between public and private sectors. Now, not the kind of partnership where government sets the agenda and the private sector writes a check. I'm talking about real cooperation, where communities, foundations, businesses, and faith organizations bring their networks, their resources, and their moral authority to the table alongside governments. But the force I want to highlight today is one that often goes unmentioned in these policy rooms. It's that of faith. Across every tradition, in every corner of the world, there is a shared teaching that we are not owners of this earth. We are its stewards. Whether you read it in Genesis, in the Quran, in the Vedas, or in the teachings of indigenous elders, the message is the same. Creation is sacred, and we are accountable for how we treat it. That is not a small thing. That is a moral foundation shared by billions of people. And when people are moved by that conviction, they act because they feel they are called to it. And here's the remarkable part. They can make an enormous difference without spending enormous amounts of money. Let me give you some examples that have stayed with me. In New Zealand, a group of young people from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Muslim community, and the Saithasai community came together, organized with the help of the local Jewish community, to plant native trees in Manjir. They did not wait for a government program. They simply showed up, side by side, and put trees in the ground. What they built was more than a forest. It is a model. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, Catholic, Orthodox, Muslim, and Jewish leaders came together for a joint call to action on water and environmental protection. They took that energy into schools, training students from different backgrounds to work together on these very issues. At the global level, the G20 Interfaith Forum, founded by my colleague, Professor Cole Durham, who is here with us today, has built a network of networks that brings policymakers, faith leaders, and civil society together each year to translate faith-informed perspectives into real policy solutions for the world's most pressing challenges. I am proud to say that His All Holiness, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomeus, and His Virtue, Sheikhul Islam Allah Shakur Pashazadi, both here with us today, have participated in that forum for several years, alongside members of the Quorum of the Quorum of the 12 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Different traditions, one table, one purpose. That is exactly the model of a public-private, multi-faith cooperation this moment demands. None of these efforts required a massive budget. They required conviction, community, and leadership. We cannot afford to wait, not on water, not on green space, and not on a planet our children will inherit. So let us leave this room not just having discussed the problem, but committed to being a part of the solution. Let us organize our communities, let us engage our faith leaders, and let us do what people of conscience have always done when the stakes are high. We show up. Thank you.
Please. Şimdi söz sırası Türkiye'den Reis Gıda Tarım Ürünleri Anonim Şirketi Başkanı ve Türkiye'nin tanınmış iş adamlarından Sayın Mehmet Reis Beyefendi'de. Sayın Reis.
Değerli konuklar, bugün burada insanlığın yaşam hakkını doğrudan ilgilendiren küresel meseleleri değerlendirmek üzere bizi bir araya getiren Marmara Grubu Vakfı'na ve değerli başkanına teşekkür ediyorum. İçinde bulunduğumuz çağ, insanlık tarihinin en kritik dönemlerinden birini işaret etmektedir. Çünkü artık iklim değişikliği, su kaynaklarının azalması, biyolojik çeşitlilik kaybı ve doğal kaynakların hızla tükenmesi stratejik bir boyuta ulaşmıştır. 2050 yılında dünya nüfusunun yaklaşık 10 milyara ulaşması beklenmektedir. Artan nüfus daha fazla gıda ve daha fazla su ihtiyacını beraberinde getirmektedir. Dünyada su kaynaklarının yalnızca 2,5'i tatlı sudan oluşmaktadır. Bugün bunun büyük bir kısmında buzullar ve yeraltı sularında bulunmaktadır. İnsanlığın doğrudan erişebildiği kullanılabilir su miktarı ise toplam su varlığının yaklaşık %1 seviyesindedir. Bu tablo, su yönetiminin stratejik ve toplumsal bir güvenlik konusu olarak ele alınması gerektiğini açıkça ortaya koymaktadır. Özellikle tarım sektörü açısından değerlendirildiğinde su, üretimin temel unsurudur. Küresel ölçekte gıda üretiminin yaklaşık 2/3'ü sulu tarıma dayanmaktadır. Dolayısıyla su kaynaklarını verimli yönettiğimiz ölçüde gıda arz güvenliğimizi güçlendirebiliriz. Diğer önemli bir konu ise iklim kriziyle birlikte artan şiddetli yağışlar erozyonu hızlandırmakta, tarıma elverişli, verimli üst toprak kayıplarına yol açmaktadır. Oysa bilimsel araştırmalar yalnızca 1 santimetrelik verimli üst toprağın oluşması 500 ila 1000 yıl arasında sürdüğünü göstermektedir. Bu nedenle toprağın ve suyun korunması yalnızca tarımsal üretim açısından değil, yaşamın sürdürülebilirliği açısından da hayati öneme sahiptir. Bugün karşı karşıya olduğumuz diğer bir kritik başlık ise biyoçeşitlilik kaybıdır. Birleşmiş Milletler verilerine göre dünyada yaklaşık 1 milyon canlı türü yok olma tehlikesiyle karşı karşıyadır. Ülkemizden bir örnek verecek olursak, 161 balık türünün bulunduğu Karadeniz kıyılarındaki balık çeşidi 59 türünün neslinin tükendiğini gösteriyor. Uzmanlar iklim değişikliği, çevre kirliliği, ormansızlaşma, çayır ve mera alanlarının zarar görmesiyle doğal kaynakların aşırı kullanımının biyoçeşitlilik kaybının temel nedenleri arasında yer aldığını ifade etmektedir. Oysa insanlığın ekonomik ve sosyal refahı doğrudan ekosistemlerin sürdürülebilirliğine bağlıdır. Bugün küresel ekonominin yaklaşık %50'si doğal kaynaklardan sağlanmaktadır. Birleşmiş Milletler raporlarına göre dünya genelinde 2,1 milyar insan güvenli bir şekilde temiz suya erişemiyor. Bu veri, su ve gıda güvenliğinin bugün dünyanın en önemli stratejik başlıklarından biri haline geldiğini göstermektedir. Bu noktada risk yönetimi anlayışının güçlendirilmesi büyük önem taşımaktadır. Çünkü kriz yönetimiyle kalıcı sonuçlar elde etmek daha zor ve daha maliyetli olacaktır. Bugün Avrupa Birliği'nin yeşil mutabakat ve çiftlikten çatala stratejisi kapsamında attığı adımlar bu dönüşümün önemini ortaya koymaktadır. Yeni dönem üretimin yalnızca miktarı değil, çevresel etkisi, karbon ayak izi, su tüketimi ve sürdürülebilirliği de belirleyici olacaktır. İklim Değişikliği Çerçeve Sözleşmeli Taraflar Konferansı'nın COP31'in Türkiye'de düzenlenecek olması, ülkemiz iklim değişikliğiyle mücadele, sürdürülebilir tarım ve yeşil dönüşüm alanlarında bölgesel bir vizyon ortaya koyabilmesi açısından önemli bir fırsat niteliği taşımaktadır. Sonuç olarak, bugün insanlık olarak yalnızca kendi yaşamımızdan değil, gelecek nesillerin yaşam hakkından da sorumluyuz. Bu nedenle yaşam alışkanlıklarımızı üretim modellerimizi ve kaynak kullanım anlayışımızı yeniden değerlendirmek zorundayız. Unutulmamalıdır ki, üzerinde yaşadığımız bu gezegen yalnızca bugünün değil, geleceğin de emanetidir. Sağlıklı bir yaşam, sağlıklı bir dünya ile mümkündür. Her yıl 22 Mayıs yani 9 gün sonra Dünya Biyoçeşitlilik Günü olarak kutlanmaktadır. Unutmayalım ki biyoçeşitlilik varsa hayat vardır. Çok önemli bir tespiti de paylaşarak sözlerimi tamamlamak istiyorum. Uluslararası Para Fonu'nun savunma harcamaları raporunda silah satışlarının son 20 yılda reel olarak 2 katına çıktığı vurgulanmaktadır. Bugün dünyada savunmaya harcanan bütçenin sadece 3,4'ü açlık çeken 738 milyon insan için umut olabilecek büyüklükte olduğu ifade edilmektedir. Bilimsel raporlar küresel açlık ve iklim değişikliğiyle mücadelede de yıllardır ortaya konulan çabaların yeterli seviyeye ulaşmadığını göstermektedir. Hedeflere ulaşmak için gerekli uluslararası işbirliği, finansman altyapısı oluşturulamazsa bedelini gezegenimiz ve insanlık ödeyecektir. Bugün burada en güçlü çağrı daha adil, daha yaşanabilir, daha sürdürülebilir ve daha başarılı, barışçıl bir dünya olmasıdır. Saygılarımı sunuyorum. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Biz de size çok teşekkür ediyoruz Sayın Mehmet Reis Beyefendi. Şimdi Mısır Borsa Yönetim Kurulu Başkanı Profesör Doktor Muhammed Omran'ı davet ediyorum. Sayın Muhammed Omran.
صباح الخيرات جميعا. Mr. Chairman, very good morning everybody, and I'm really glad to be here in Istanbul to present my intervention about this important conference. Today, I did hear some powerful words from distinguished speakers actually, from the religion point of view, economic point of view, development point of view. But today, given my background as a professor of financial economics, ex-chairman of the Egyptian Stock Exchange, as well as the Financial Regulatory Authority, had the chance to work at both the International Monetary Fund and the Arab Monetary Fund. So I'm glad to bring to you the dimension of the capital market and how the capital market can enhance or can participate to solve the problem that we are facing today. If we go back to the year 2015, we understand that the world did make a very important commitment. Actually, it's the Paris Agreement, the COP21, which is talking about the limiting the warming to 1.5 Celsius, and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That is the target, especially target SDG number 6 for clean water and sanitation, SDG 13 for climate action, and SDG 15 for life on land. But today, in 2026, 11 years later, here are the facts, shocking facts actually. We are failing to achieve these targets. We do not lack knowledge. We are not failing because we lack technology. We are failing because we have not mobilized the finance to turn our promises to actions. And this summit is talking about the how to protect our planet, so it's talk about itself actually. So in reality, over the past 50 years, more than 35% of Earth's wetland have gone actually. Millions of hectares of forests have been lost to agriculture, mining, and unregulated business. The green is giving away to yellow, forests turning to desert, and wetlands turning to dust. So in reality, we need to understand it is not just an ecological issue, it is a systematic crisis affecting economic sustainability, social stability, and long-term development across our region and beyond. So the economic cost of water and green losses are as follows. Globally, up to 30 trillion in global GDP at risk from water by 2050. Natural losses could reduce global GDP by up to 2.7 trillion annually by the year 2030. In our region, the Middle East and North Africa, 83% underwater stress. In Central Asia, Aral Sea, 90% shrink since the year 1960. Here in Turkey, water per capita is 1,100, and which is approaching the threshold level. In Egypt, 97% of our citizens are depending on Nile and are facing increasing water stress. So in reality, we need to think or to rethink water and green as economic assets. It is not only environmental problem, but it's only infrastructure and economic issues. So the freshwater system underpins agriculture, 70% of global use, industry, energy, and cities. Forest and green space regulate climate, store carbon, protect watersheds, and support biodiversity. You cannot separate healthy water from a healthy environment. And the question now we must answer is, if water and green are core infrastructure, why they are under investing in our time by 70%? So the reality for some investment numbers is that for every $1 invested in watershed protection, we can get up to $4.3 in economic returns. Even some people claim, or some economists claim, it can go up to 1 to 10 actually. Every $1 invested in waterland restoration generates up to $7 to $23 in benefits, and every $1 invested in sustainable and land management can get up 3 to 6 in avoided losses. Other number, which is the cost of inaction, actually, if we did not take an aggressive action to protect our land or our planet, is 6 to 10 trillion annual losses from land degradation until the year 2030. 23 to 43, I mean, it's a big gap, actually, or projected cumulative losses by the year 2050 if trends continue. 700 million people could displaced by water by the year 2030. The question is not whether we can afford to invest $1.5 trillion annually, it is whether we can afford not to do so.
Sir, please.
Very quickly.
Finally.
So what is the scale of the capital market, what the capital market can do actually? The global capital market today stands at 133 trillion. So even 1% allocation will give us 1.33 trillion. In institutional assets, pension insurance has 120 billion for long-term infrastructure. Sovereign wealth fund has $15 trillion actually. So if we redirect only half a percentage of the global financial asset, this could mobilize 650 billion for the water green project, and this is what we can need for the previous or for the coming period, actually. So what is the proposal here for our region, actually? I'm proposing that to have what we can call the Euro-Asian Water Green Finance Initiatives. So if you can imagine that we can get a regional fund anchored by sovereign wealth funds and development banks to de-risk private investment in different projects. Imagine a knowledge hub here in Istanbul, sharing best practice from Cairo to Tashkent to Warsaw. This could include blended finance structure, combined public capital, development bank participation, and the private investment. So I just would like to go very quickly to the last one, actually. The final words, to save your time, is as follows. We do not inherit the earth from our previous generation. We borrow it from our children. In the world of finance, where I'm coming from, we understand that every loan comes with interest. The interest on our environmental loan is due now. We cannot default in our children. Let us pay this debt with action, with capital, and with courage. Let us finance the water, finance the green, and finance our future. If it is not us, then who? And if it is not now, then when? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Now, I invite from Kenya, former Minister of Trade of Kenya, His Excellency Mukisa Kitui.
Your Excellency, Dr. Akan Sove, and all the members of the board of Marmara Group Foundation, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear spiritual leaders, ladies and gentlemen, first may I express my appreciation to be invited to share in this historical conversation at a historically unique moment, as I'll say towards the end of my brief remarks, that the world has been having growth in awareness and knowledge of the threats we face on degreening the world and water deficit is a matter that's very much in public domain. Our challenge is not what we don't know, it's what is impeding concrete action. Nearly 34 years ago, at the Earth Summit in June 1992 in Buenos Aires, in Rio de Janeiro, the world was very clear on a comprehensive need to mainstream environmental sustainability as a measure of planning across the different disciplines in development. At the Earth Summit, there were global pledges made which directed promises of action towards stemming deforestation, desertification around the world, conserving and protecting and better utilizing in a sustainable way the global water resources. And these calls have continued to grow since then. Indeed, if we go back to the mid-1980s, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Boutros Ghali, was the first to hearken to the call that the world is working towards a future where the most predictable cause of war is likely to be friction of access to fresh water. This call was repeated many times by Kofi Annan, by Ban Ki-moon, and famously by the World Bank Vice President Ismail Segaldin, who said that we were facing a century of war over water. Since then, we have seen dramatic action, just demonstrating how predictable this slide has been. At the start of this year, in January, the UN declared the world to have a water bankruptcy. In fact, to put it very clearly, there's a declaration of global water bankruptcy from the UN, and an estimate that every year the world is losing the equivalent of water for 280 million people. And unless something is done dramatically, the future looks very bleak. We have already tested some of the consequences of inaction. As was very ably mentioned here by the Emeritus Minister of Defense of Austria, the multilateral system has seen clearly where we are headed at a time when we have also seen the declining ability of the multilateral system. Over the past decade, I've been an Under-Secretary General of the United Nations for 8 years. And we're very conscious about quantifying, measuring the deleterious actions of humanity on forests, on vegetation, on water. But we have also seen the declining ability of the multilateral system to walk the talk of member states. We have seen the decline of a rules-based system that projected solutions that were necessary for humanity. Consequences, we're already seeing the frictions. Recently, Ethiopia constructed the Renaissance Dam, which disrupted the flow of water on the Blue Nile. And the frictions and tensions between Ethiopia and Egypt that were occasioned by the anxiety over that project have not left us. There's still much uncertainty about the long-term future of this investment. Similarly, those of us who live to the south of the Sahara, we see every year the steady and mitigated spread of the Sahara Desert to the savannas and equatorial forests of the south, of the Mediterranean, the tropical belt of Africa. Related to that, we see much more heightened resource conflict between pastoralists and agriculturalists, striving on water resources and biomass resources. And beyond those kind of areas, we're seeing the leaching of agricultural territory, the decline of productivity of some lands in agricultural areas. For example, China, up to 35% of subterranean water has been polluted to the extent that the land cannot be sustainable for healthy food production. So these are complementing each other as challenges and problems to the world. What does it need to reverse this? Unfortunately, the humility, civility, modesty, and spirit of engagement that has driven global awareness about sustainable agricultural activity and utilization of water is giving way to the rise of impunity, arrogance, brinkmanship, and the desire to leverage every opportunity and every power for short-term gain. When the politics of identity destroys the foundations of multilateralism, we have to look beyond the traditional multilateral institutions for possible solutions. And circumstances like those create the conditions why the Eurasian platform a space to converse freely, bringing together different cultures, religious faiths, ideological and intellectual backgrounds, as you do here, becomes so much more important. In fact, the other day I was thinking, Mr. President, that if this platform had not been created, the events of the past few years will have made it necessary that you do today what you did 29 years ago. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, dear Minister. Thank you. İki konuşmacımız daha kaldı. Mr. Paul Picard. Mr. Paul Picard. Thank you so much.
Distinguished panelists, distinguished President, Dr. Akan, we're so grateful to be here. I realize I'm the last speaker before the break, so I will be very brief. It is such a joy to be here. I will not repeat the shocking facts that were mentioned today about what is happening around us in terms of receding waters, receding green space. And it is not only an environmental issue, but it has been said, a human, a moral, and also a spiritual matter. Allow me to share quickly how we try to address and to act in our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're Christians, and at the center of our beliefs is the Lord Jesus Christ. And once the Gospel of Matthew mentioned that Jesus was asked this question, what is the greatest commandment? And he responded, love God. And then right away added another greatest commandment, which is love your neighbor. And loving your neighbor especially the most vulnerable, is something that is key and most important. We're a relatively small church of 18 million people, but we strive to follow these teachings to help and bless and care for others. In 2025 alone, the church provided $1.5 billion in terms of assistance, humanitarian and other projects across 2,000 countries and territories in 3,500 projects. Where does this money come from? It comes from a simple spiritual principle, fasting. Many of you here fast and have fasted, and we do also. Every first Sunday of the month, the church fasts. And during this fast, abstaining from food and drinks for 24 hours, people pray, people fast and donate the money that they have not eaten. And this creates, imagine, every month, millions of people donating money that the food they have not consumed. It allows us to do a lot of good around us. A significant portion of these funds are towards water resources and making access to water more available. Giving water is literally giving life. Close to us, and I won't have time to detail some of the projects, but here in Turkey, after the devastating earthquake of 2023, February, the church was present and assisted in many ways, including restoring a factory that was built, producing water and bottling, and then shipping millions of liters of water, and then at the same time working with the private sector to ship water filters because the water was polluted. This was one way that we alleviated the sufferings. In Central Asia, we have a representative of Uzbekistan. We just finished a project with the Agency for Strategic Reform under the President of the Republic to allow schools that are not connected to sanitation to be connected in an efficient and affordable way to allow the school students to go to school in good conditions. I would like to close. I was very glad to hear about the UN International Water Conference that will be held in Dushanbe, where we will participate as well. These examples of us gathering together are very important. I want to thank our president, Dr. Hakan Suver, Secretary General also Sezgin, who is all around taking care of us, for their vision. They're bringing, I don't know if you realize, and Minister Tikui just spoke about it, they're bringing the international organization, national government, civil society, non-governmental organization, communities, local, religious, all together. This is a show of united efforts, and this is how we overcome the difficulties when the international system cannot do that. I'm very grateful to be able to be with you and look forward to cooperating with all of you. Thank you so much.
Merci, Monsieur Paul Picard. Şimdi son konuşmacımız Avrupa Birliği İnsan Hakları Mahkemesi Hakimi Sayın Dragulo Popovic, the Judge of the EU Human Rights Mr. Dragulo Popovic. Okay.
Your All Holiness, Eminences, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our planet is under the dominion of law, which is a sophisticated mechanism capable to face all sorts of challenges, including those that currently acquire our attention to the greatest extent, such as, for instance, the artificial intelligence, the green energy, or water supplies. The law is operative both at national and international levels. It regulates the international order. It is nowadays, however, evident that the international law is in crisis. It was rightly remarked by Henry Kissinger already back in 2014 that it proved, and I quote, unable to accommodate a major challenge in power relations, unquote. The international law, one should say, is a patient hit by a disease that needs care and help. It is, however, easier to pose a diagnosis than to propose a therapy to the patient. The latter should depart from the origin of the phenomenon. The law relies on a consensus of those who form a community based on it. At the national level, these are citizens being equal, whereas at the international level, the situation is more complex because the international community is composed of entities having their own internal settlements. Once upon a time, the members of the international community were exclusively countries governed by legitimate dynasties. They were replaced by nation-states initially required to adopt minorities protection and later on the protection of fundamental human rights and democracy. That is where we come to a problem. The acceptance of the values just mentioned has never been spread widely enough so as to encompass all members of the community of nations on the globe. Democracies coexist with autocracies. An internal constitutional settlement is not regarded as a circumstance required for membership in the international community. But the United Nations Charter, still representing the foundations of the world order, enshrines in its preamble the faith in fundamental human rights. Such a faith has been menaced in our time by the language of weapons spreading in various parts of the planet and putting in jeopardy the very essence of the law. Let us remind ourselves on what Immanuel Kant wrote in his essay on perpetual peace. And I quote, laws are in force as dominion laws lose in force, as dominion increases in extent. Therefore, and to sum up, we must pose the questions such as, where do we stand today? And how can we renew, reaffirm, and indeed improve the international law? It is in that line of thought that it seems justified to raise the issue whether the internal settlement of the members of the world community of nations should be taken into account when rethinking and renewing the world order. Or maybe we should stick to a pessimistic standpoint, which says that there is already enough trouble worldwide, even without raising such an issue. Closing this little intervention, I kindly ask you to believe me that the latter leads nowhere, and I'm grateful for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Judge. Dear Judge, thank you. Raportör ve temsilci arkadaşlarımız yerinden kalkmasınlar. Biz burayı terk ediyoruz ama Mark Donfried arkadaşımın yönetiminde gücün hukuku yeniden yazdığı bir dünyada kadın hakları üzerine toplantımız devam ediyor. Mark Donfried, we can go. Mark Donfried, come here. Yes. We continue.
abi. Yorulduysan biraz da biz verelim. Vallahi tamam sırayla. Emrah ben. İstiyorsan geçelim. Geçeyim istiyorsan. Sor da uygun olur mu? Tamam değişiriz şimdi seninle. Tamam. Söyle bir. Söyle de ki dur ben arayayım.
We are going to continue with the next session with a very important focus on women. So if I could ask you to start taking your seats, we do have a tight agenda. I promised Dr. Souver we would do our best to keep to the agenda. Luckily, I have the pleasure of hosting a panel with all women. Usually women are much better with respecting the time, so I think it should be much easier. But ladies and gentlemen, if I could please again ask for your attention, take your seats, we will begin. Distinguished Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th session of the 2nd day of the Eurasian Economic Summit, dedicated to the theme, Democracy, Women, and the Future of Peace. Women's rights in a world where power rewrites law. It is a privilege to moderate this important discussion today among such distinguished leaders, policymakers, academics, diplomats, and representatives of civil society from across Europe, Eurasia, Middle East, and beyond. I would especially like to thank our good friends, Dr. Souver and Sezgin Bilgic, as well as the entire Marmara Group Foundation, for continuing to create a platform where dialogue is placed above division, where cooperation is placed above confrontation, and mutual understanding above political polarization. Unfortunately, much more rare today than years before. We are meeting in a period of profound global transformation. Across many regions, the international community faces serious challenges, including but not limited to geopolitical tensions, economic uncertainty, social fragmentation, rapid technological change, and conflicts that continue to affect millions of people. Yet at the same time, there are also many reasons for optimism. We are witnessing remarkable advances in science, technology, education, healthcare, and global connectivity. We are seeing societies becoming more interconnected than any previous point in human history. And we are seeing increasing awareness that long-term peace and stability cannot be achieved through confrontation alone, but rather through cooperation, dialogue, inclusion, and shared responsibility. One of the most encouraging developments in recent decades has been the growing role of international cooperation throughout institutions such as the United Nations and other multilateral organizations. While international institutions are not perfect, they continue to provide essential frameworks for diplomacy, humanitarian action, economic cooperation, and conflict prevention. Equally important is growing understanding that sustainable economic development and democratic resilience depend on the participation of all parts of society. This includes the advancement of women in political leadership, diplomacy, business, education, and international governance, not as a symbolic exercise, but as part of a building more inclusive and effective societies. We are witnessing today, although not yet at a pace or scale we might wish for, the growing advancement of women's leadership within international governance institutions and national governments. Across the United Nations system, regional organizations, development banks, international courts, some national parliaments and governments, and global policy forums, women are increasingly shaping the decisions that influence peace, security, economic developments, climate policy, humanitarian response, and international cooperation. This is not simply a matter of representation, but a strategic transformation in the way global governance itself is evolving. Over the past decades, the international community has increasingly recognized that sustainable development, peace, and effective governance cannot be achieved when half of humanity remains underrepresented in the decision-making structures. This shift is especially significant in a rapidly changing global economy shaped by artificial intelligence, digital finance, innovation ecosystems, and cross-border technological cooperation, where leadership is increasingly defined by knowledge, creativity, innovation, and human capital. International institutions have a crucial role in sustaining and accelerating these positive trends. The United Nations and multilateral organizations can act not only as political platforms, but as enablers of opportunity by supporting education, strengthening legal frameworks, encouraging economic participation, promoting leadership development, expanding digital inclusion, and fostering cross-border networks of mentorship and cooperation. At the same time, the world is entering a new technological era shaped by artificial intelligence, digital economies, and unprecedented access to information and communication. These transformations are changing not only the economies themselves, but also the societies, the way they interact and cooperate internationally. If managed responsibly, these developments hold enormous positive potential. Artificial intelligence can improve education, healthcare, diplomacy, and economic opportunity. Digital platforms can connect cultures and societies across borders. And new economic technologies and digital assets can create broader participation in global markets and innovation ecosystems. At the same time, AI's successful future depends on digital integrity. For younger generations especially, technology is creating opportunities for international engagement, entrepreneurship, cultural exchange, and civil participation on a scale previously unimaginable. But technological progress must remain connected to ethics, human dignity, and international responsibility. This is why cultural diplomacy is becoming increasingly important in the 21st century. For many years, diplomacy was used primarily through the lens of governments and geopolitical interests. Today, however, we understand that the long-term peace is also built through education, culture, academic exchange, business cooperation, technological cooperation, and people-to-people dialogue. Cultural diplomacy creates trust where politics often cannot. It helps create societies recognize common human values despite political differences. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that international relations are ultimately about people, not only states. In this context, discussions about democracy, rights, inclusion, and peace are not only political discussions, they are discussions about the type of global society we wish to build for future generations. The future of peace will depend not only on military strength or economic power, but also on ethical leadership, strong institutions, innovation, education, intercultural understanding, and the ability of societies to create opportunity and dignity for their citizens. This is why today's session is both of the moment and important. We are fortunate to have an exceptional panel bringing wide perspectives from across the world. I hope today's discussion will analyze challenges, but also contribute ideas, partnerships, and constructive solutions for the future. Because ultimately, peace, as was discussed many times in earlier sessions, is not only the absence of conflict, it is the presence of dignity, opportunity, dialogue, and hope. And democracy achieves its fullest meaning when societies create space for participation, responsibility, and human potential to flourish. As the famous Yunus Emre once said, "Come, let us know one another, let us make things easy, let us love and be loved, for the world belongs to no one." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and let us begin the panel. Thank you. Now, the colleagues were very efficient in cleaning and preparing the panel, so I needed to re-engage. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin the panel with the high honor of introducing a close partner of ours, or from a country which is a close partner of ours, North Macedonia, the Deputy Minister for European Affairs of North Macedonia, Her Excellency Victoria Trakov. If you could please come up to the podium. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here with you this year today. Thank you, Mr. Akan Suber, for your attention, and to all Marmara Group Foundation about this privilege to be with you and to be here this year again. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear hosts, distinguished participants, it's a great honor for me to address this important event in Turkey today at a time when the world is facing profound geopolitical, economic, and social transformation. In an era when power often reshapes law, our responsibility is even greater to perceive dignity, justice, and equality as the fundamental values of modern democracies. As a Deputy Minister for European Affairs, I believe that European integration is not just a political process, it's a value-based choice. And one of the strongest indicators of the maturity of a society is the position of women within it. Women's rights are not marginal issues, they are a clear measure of the quality of democracy, the rule of law, and sustainable development. History shows us that when women hold leadership positions, they not only bring a different perspective, they bring courage, resilience, and vision. We are familiar with the words of Margaret Thatcher, who says, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. Sorry, man. This message is not just a witty remark, it's an acknowledgement of the determination of particularly of women leadership. Yet today, in the 21st century, our goal is not for women to be exceptional in politics and economics, but the rule, not a symbol, but equal actor in policy making. In that context, allow me to reflect on a historical figure who symbolically connects our topic with the place where we were gathered today. The history of the Ottoman Empire remains Suleiman the Magnificent as one of the most powerful rulers. But history also bears witnesses that besides him stood a woman of exceptional intelligence, political intuition, and a strong teacher, Hürrem Sultan. She was not just a wife. She was an active participant in court policies, engaged in diplomatic correspondence, and a founder of numerous humanitarian and educational institutions, schools, hospitals, and public kitchens that served the people. Her words, transmitted through historical sources and cultural heritage, reflects her self-confidence and awareness of her own worth. Even if all the women in the world gathered and screamed, they would not drown out my whisper, she said. It is a symbol of influence that does not have to be loud to be decisive. As a mother, she understood the importance of educating future rulers. As a wife, she became the first legal wife of a sultan in centuries of traditions, a historical president, and transformed court practice. As a public figure, she insisted in institutions that left a lasting mark. And perhaps her reign lies a silent but significant lesson. The strength of an empire is measured not only by its power, but also by the stability, partnership, and vision at its peak. Without the trust and stability that existed between Suleiman and Hürrem, it is uncertain whether the empire would have reached such a level of a political and cultural maternity. The history of the Balkans also remains as of this dimension. In Bitola, my hometown, the house of Eleni, known as the Great Loft of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, still exists today, as well as the room in which he continued his education. These places are not only cultural landmarks, they remind us that behind every great statesman there is a personal story, support, and inspiration. Therefore, when we talk about leadership, stability, and statesmanship, we cannot neglect the role of women as mothers, wife, advisor, intellectual, and carriers of social change. In the process of European integration, gender equality remains one of the core values. This means equal access to education, independence, economic independence, participation of decision-making, and protection from all forms of violence and discrimination. It also means creating conditions for women leaders in politics, diplomacy, business, and civil society. Our region has enormous potential, but that potential cannot be realized if half of the population is not fully included in the decision-making process. Today, from this platform, we send a strong message. Women do not ask for privileges. They are asking for equal opportunities. Women are not an addition to the politics. They are its essential strength. When we talk about the future of Europe and the region, that future must be inclusive, fair, and courageous. Let us create societies in which girls and women will grow up with the conviction that leadership is a natural choice, not an exceptional struggle. Let us build policies that will turn values into real opportunities. At the end, again, I will mention, as Thatcher said, watch your thoughts, for they will become actions. Our thoughts today must be thoughts of equality, partnership, and shared responsibility. And our actions must be concentrated policies, reforms, and cooperation that will guarantee that equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those excellent perspectives from North Macedonia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage member of the UK Parliament from 2015 to 2017, proud member of the board of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, and founder and initiator of the Women of the World Initiative, Her Excellency Ms. Tazmina Ahmet Sheikh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much indeed, Chair Mark Donfried, President Suver, distinguished heads of state, former presidents and prime ministers, excellencies and guests from across the Eurasian world. Assalamu alaikum. May I first of all open by remarking upon the excellence of Dr. Suver and this amazing event. The convening of 47 countries is a remarkable achievement. Can I also thank Secretary General Sezgin, who's been fantastic, and of course the organisers, the rapporteurs behind me, the interpreters at the back, and your tremendous hospitality. We were treated to so much over the past day or so, and there is so much more to come. Such arrangements, ladies and gentlemen, require deep thought, planning, consideration, and respect for all delegates. Thank you on behalf of us all, and we look forward to celebrating your 30th year with you. Thank you. It is truly an honour to stand before you in this great city at the crossroads of civilizations, to speak about something that will define not just our economies, but the future of humanity itself. Istanbul has always understood what it means to sit at the intersection of power, East and West, ancient and modern, tradition and transformation. And it is precisely at that intersection that I want to begin. Because the question before us today, the question of democracy, women, and the future of peace cannot be answered without confronting a new force that is reshaping all three. That force is artificial intelligence. We are living through the most consequential technological transition in human history. AI is not simply a tool. It is a new kind of power, one that is already determining who gets a loan, who gets a job interview, whose face is flagged at a border, and whose voice is amplified, and whose voice is erased. Across our region, from the Black Sea to Central Asia, from the Balkans to the Gulf, sovereign nations are making choices right now about whether to build, buy, or borrow AI infrastructure. Those choices are defense decisions. They are diplomatic decisions. They are decisions that will shape the next 50 years of geopolitical order. And yet, the overwhelming majority of these decisions are being made without women at the table. Let me put it this way. We are building the architecture of the future, and half of humanity is largely absent from the room where it is being designed. This is not simply a fairness argument, though fairness matters deeply. This is a strategic and security argument. When AI systems are built without diverse voices, without women, without the global south, without smaller nations, they encode the biases of those who build them. Here in Istanbul, surrounded as I am today by leaders who have governed nations through extraordinary moments of change, I want to offer a framework. Not a technical framework, but a sovereign one. The question of AI is fundamentally one of sovereignty. Who owns the data generated by your citizens? Who controls the compute infrastructure your governments depend on? Who sets the values encoded in the systems making decisions about your people? Right now, the honest answer for most nations is someone else. The AI supply chain, the data centers, the chips, the foundation models, the standards is overwhelmingly concentrated in a handful of companies, in a handful of countries. Every nation that relies on foreign AI infrastructure has, in a very real sense, outsourced a portion of its sovereignty. That is why, alongside my work in Westminster, I've been part of building the Sovereign AI Power Index, a decision-grade benchmark that assesses how ready nations and institutions are to participate in the AI economy on their own terms, through sovereign compute access, data sovereignty, capital depth, policy conditions, and directed intelligence, which is whether a nation can translate capability into coordinated strategic execution. Because, ladies and gentlemen, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed can be governed. Nations in this room, Uzbekistan, Egypt, Macedonia, Croatia, Romania, Bosnia, Lebanon, Moldova, Turkey, the UK, and others, each sit at a different point on the AI spectrum. Some are building rapidly. Some are at risk of falling behind. All of them deserve a seat at the table where the standards of the AI era are being set. This brings me to diplomacy and the women who must lead it. The diplomacy of the 21st century is no longer solely conducted in grand halls like this one, wonderful as it is. It is being conducted in the standards bodies in Geneva, in semiconductor negotiations between Washington and Beijing, in the quiet rooms where decisions are made about whose AI infrastructure is trusted and whose is treated as a threat. Women in diplomacy have always brought something special and essential to the table: the ability to build coalitions, to find common ground across seemingly irreconcilable positions, to take the long-term view when the short-term position may demand recklessness. These are not soft skills. These are the hardest skills in the world. And they are precisely the skills required to navigate a moment when AI governance has become as consequential as nuclear non-proliferation and far less understood. I've sat in rooms with defense ministers, sovereign wealth fund managers, and heads of intelligence. And I can tell you, the conversations that matter most are not about technology. They are about trust, about who you believe will use power responsibly, about which nations and institutions you are willing to build with. Women in leadership, in parliaments, in multilateral institutions, in the boardrooms of AI companies bring a different quality of trust building to those conversations. Not because of some mystical feminine quality, but because of lived experience. The experience of navigating systems not designed for you, of building authority without the inherited assumptions of power, of knowing instinctively what it means when the rules are written for you by someone else. Women don't need to be at the top table because it's the right thing to do. We need to be there because without us, countries are leaving influence, intelligence, and opportunity behind. The question isn't whether women belong in these conversations. The question is whether international institutions and governments are clever enough to put us there. This session title asks about the future of peace. Let me be direct about what peace requires in this moment. It requires that the nations of Eurasia do not sleepwalk into AI dependency the way previous generations sleepwalked into energy dependency, and then discovered, too late, how much sovereignty they'd surrendered. They become instruments not of shared prosperity, but of concentrated power. We've already seen this. Facial recognition systems that perform significantly worse on women and people of colour. Hiring algorithms trained on historical data that systematically disadvantage female candidates. Autonomous weapon systems whose rules of engagement reflect the assumptions of a very narrow group of engineers and strategists. Friends, these are not technical glitches, they are political failures, and they have consequences measured not in lines of code, but in human lives. In conflict zones, inaccurate AI-driven targeting is not an abstraction, it's a village, it's a hospital, it's a family. In economic systems, discriminatory AI is not a data problem. It's a woman unable to access credit, unable to build a business, unable to participate in the prosperity being promised. If we are serious about peace, real, durable, democratic peace, then we must be serious about the intelligence that is increasingly governing our world. It requires that the architecture of AI governance, the standards, the safety frameworks, the diplomatic agreements on autonomous weapons includes voices from this region, not just from Silicon Valley and Shenzhen. It requires that we treat the inclusion of women in AI and defense decision-making not as a diversity initiative, but as a security imperative. Because the evidence is clear. More diverse decision-making bodies make better decisions, fewer catastrophic mistakes, and more durable agreements. And it requires that the multilateral organizations represented in this very room, the networks of former leaders sitting here who still carry enormous influence in the world, begin to take AI governance as seriously as they have taken trade, energy, and security. Because the moment to shape these norms is now. Not in 5 years when the architecture has already been built, but now. In closing, I come from Scotland, a small nation that has punched far above its weight in science, philosophy, and statecraft for 300 years. We did so not because of our size, but because of our commitment to education, to the free exchange of ideas, and to the conviction that the world is improved by the participation of more voices, not fewer. That conviction feels more urgent to me now than at any point in my political life. We are at an inflection point, not just technologically, but civilizationally. The choices made in the next 3 to 5 years about who governs AI and on whose terms, and with those values embedded, will echo for generations to come. Istanbul, this beautiful city, knows something about standing at an inflection point. It has been the seat of empires, the bridge of religions, and the meeting point of worlds. It survived and thrived because it understood that enduring power simply cannot just be taken. It is built through relationship, through exchange, and through the patient work of diplomacy, as we see today and have seen yesterday at this very forum. That is the work before us. Let us do it together with every nation in this room and with every woman who should be in this room but isn't yet, and with the seriousness that this extraordinary moment in our time demands of us all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Tazmina. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very honorable and warm welcome to the Secretary of the Federal Government of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Her Excellency Dr. Edita Karadzic.
Good afternoon. Poštovane dame i poštovana gospodo, cijenjeni učesnici 29. Euroazijskog ekonomskog samita. Tema o kojoj danas govorimo nije apstraktna. To je pitanje našeg vremena. Šta se dešava sa pravom kada ga počne oblikovati moć i kakve su posljedice toga za žene, demokratiju i mir? Živimo u vremenu dubokih promjena. Globalne ravnoteže moći se mijenjaju, a paralelno s tim mijenja se i način na koji se pravo primjenjuje. Zakoni postoje, ustavi postoje, međunarodno pravo postoji, ali njihova primjena sve češće zavisi od političke volje. A kada pravo oslabi u praksi, među prvima slabe prava žena. Zato prava žena nisu sporedno pitanje. Ona su najprecizniji pokazatelj da li demokratija zaista funkcioniše. Jer kada zakon prestane biti jednak za sve, on se prvo lomi na onima koji imaju manje moći. Iskustvo nas uči da krize i sukobi gotovo uvijek pogoršavaju prava žena. U takvim trenucima jednakost se počinje predstavljati kao luksuz, a prava se odgađaju za neko bolje vrijeme. Ali pravda i pravo ne mogu čekati i upravo tada se vidi stvarna snaga jednog društva. Jer žene nisu samo žrtve teških vremena, one su nositeljce otpornosti, stabilnosti i obnove. Bosna i Hercegovina to, nažalost, vrlo dobro zna. Tokom agresije na Bosnu i Hercegovinu, žene su bile izložene najtežim oblicima kršenja ljudskih prava, uključujući i sistemsko seksualno nasilje. Iz Sarajeva, Srebrenice, Foče, Višegrada, Prijedora dolaze priče koje nisu samo sjećanja, nego opomena. Žene su gubile porodice, domove i sigurnost, ali nisu gubile dostojanstvo i nisu ostale nijeme. Nakon agresije, mnoge su nastavile borbu za istinu i pravdu, pokazujući da mir ne znači šutnju, nego hrabrost. To iskustvo nije samo naše u Bosni i Hercegovini. To je obrazac koji se ponavlja svuda, gdje pravo oslabi, a moć ostane bez kontrole. I upravo tu dolazimo do ključnog problema. Uprkos toj ulozi i tom teretu, žene su i dalje rijetko prisutne tamo gdje se donose najvažnije odluke, posebno u mirovnim procesima. Za pregovaračkim stolovima svjedoci smo žena nema ili su rijetkost, a mir koji se gradi bez žena nije potpun. Mir može zaustaviti sukob, ali ne mora izgraditi povjerenje. Može donijeti sporazum, ali ne mora donijeti pravdu. Zato uključivanje žena nije pitanje simbolike, to je pitanje kvaliteta i trajnosti mira. Demokratija nije samo pravo glasa. Demokratija znači stvarnu mogućnost učešća u donošenju odluka. Ako žene nisu ravnopravno uključene, demokratija nije potpuna. Danas, čak i u razvijenim demokratskim društvima, vidimo jaz između formalnih prava i njihove stvarne primjene. A zakon koji postoji samo na papiru nije zaštita, on je prazno obećanje. Zato ovo pitanje nije samo moralno, ono je političko i ekonomsko. Ne može biti održivog razvoja tamo gdje žene nisu ravnopravne. Ne može biti stabilne ekonomije tamo gdje se njihov rad i znanje nedovoljno vrednuju. Zato nam danas nisu potrebne nove deklaracije. Potrebne su konkretne politike i dosljedna primjena zakona. Potrebne su institucije koje štite prava bez izuzetaka. Potrebni su budžeti koji ovu oblast ne tretiraju kao sporednu. I potrebni su procesi u kojima žene učestvuju ravnopravno, a ne formalno, nego stvarno. Jer ovdje ne govorimo samo o ženama. Govorimo o tome kakav svijet i pravni poredak želimo. Da li će zakon ostati temelj društva ili postati alat moći? Govorimo o tome da li demokratija ima snagu da uključi ili će nastaviti da isključuje. I govorimo o tome kakav mir želimo. Jer mir nije samo odsustvo sukoba. Mir je prisustvo pravde. Na kraju želim jasno reći, u svijetu u kojem moć pokušava prepraviti zakon, naš odgovor mora biti principijelan. Zakon mora štititi, a ne služiti sili. Demokratija mora uključivati, a ne isključivati. Mir se mora graditi sa ženama, a ne bez njih. Jer društvo koje ne štiti prava žena, ne štiti ni vlastitu budućnost. Hvala vam.
Thank you very much. It is my distinct honor to invite to the stage member of the Board of Directors, Rice, Food and Agricultural Products Incorporated, Turkey, the Honorable Isile Forgun.
Sayın konuklar, konuşmama başlamadan önce Marmara Grubu Vakfı Başkanımız Sayın Akkan Bey'e, kıymetli eşine ve Marmara Grubu Vakfı'nın değerli tüm ekibine çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Bugün burada bizlere de yer verdikleri için. Ben bugün Türkiye'den söz alan bir iş insanı, bir anne, bir cumhuriyet kadını ve barışın ortak diliyle konuşmak isteyen bir insan olarak bulunmayı büyük bir sorumluluk olarak görüyorum. Dünya kritik bir eşikten geçiyor. Savaşlar yaşıyoruz, göçler oluyor, iklim krizi bir yanda, gıda güvencesi var, enerji krizi yaşıyoruz, ekonomik kırılganlıklar, artan eşitsizlikler. Bu durumlarda tabii ki devletlerin ve toplumlar yeni kararlar almaya zorluyor. Böyle bir dönemde en temel sorumuz şudur aslında. Hukuk insan onurunu ve adaleti koruyarak gücü sınırlayacak mı? Yoksa güç hukukun sınırlarını kendi çıkarlarına göre yeniden mi şekillendirecek? Ben inanıyorum ki kalıcı barışın, güçlü demokrasinin ve sürdürülebilir kalkınmanın yolu hukuku, adaleti, eşit temsili ve insan onurunu merkeze almaktan geçiyor. Bugün dünya nüfusuna baktığımız zaman yarısını aslında kadınlar oluşturuyor. Ancak karar alma mekanizmalarına baktığımızda bu gerçek hala yeterince karşılık bulamıyor. Parlamentolar arası birlik 2026 Ocak verilerine göre dünya genelinde ulusal parlamentolardaki sandalyelerin yalnızca %27,5'u kadınlara ait. Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi'nde ise kadın milletvekili oranına baktığımız zaman %19,93 düzeyinde. Cumhuriyetimiz seçme ve seçilme hakkı başta olmak üzere toplumsal hayatta eşit katılımın önünü açan çok kıymetli bir mirasa, tarihsel mirasa sahip. Bu miras yalnızca geçmişin gururu değil, aslında geleceğe karşı taşıdığımız sorumluluğun da temelini oluşturuyor. Eşit temsil yalnızca bir hak meselesi değil, demokrasiye derinlik, hukuka vicdan, ekonomiye denge, topluma dayanıklılık ve barışa kalıcılık kazandıran stratejik bir mesele. Aslında barış konusuna da burada değinmek istiyorum. Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nin 1325 sayılı kadın, barış ve güvenlik kararı, barış ve güvenlik süreçlerine eşit katılımı uluslararası gündemin merkezine taşımış. Bu kararın üzerinden yaklaşık 25 yıl geçmiş. Artık barışı yalnızca anlaşma metinlerinden ibaret görmeyen, toplumun vicdanında karşılık bulan kapsayıcı bir anlayışa ihtiyacımız var. Çünkü barış, yıkılan güvenin yeniden inşa edilmesiyle, ailede umudun korunmasıyla ve toplumda dayanışmanın büyümesiyle kalıcı hale geliyor. Bugün güvenlik kavramı üzerine de yeniden düşünmek zorundayız. Güvenlik artık yalnızca sınırlar, savunma sistemleri ve askeri güçler üzerinden tanımlanamaz. Gerçek güvenlik şu an için nedir? Gıda güvencesidir, su kaynaklarının korunmasıdır, iklim adaletidir, eğitimdir, sağlıktır, hukuk devletidir ve insan onurunun korunmasıdır. Ben gıda sektöründen gelen bir iş insanıyım. Bu sebeple biraz da değinmek istiyorum aslında. Hep sofra paylaşmaktır diyoruz. Sofradan bahsetmek istiyorum. Sofra ekonomik bir faaliyet olarak da bakılıyor ama bir sofra aslında bir sofra etrafında buluşalım denir her zaman. Bir sofra emeğin, bereketin, paylaşmanın ve barışın aslında en sade halidir. Topraktan da bahsetmek isterim tabii ki burada. Toprak işlenecek, tohum korunacak, çiftçiler üretimde kalacak, emek görünür olacak, gıda adil paylaşılacak ki insanlar aynı sofrada güvenle buluşabilsin. İşte gerçek güvenlik aslında budur. Kadın çiftçilere bu noktada değinmek isterim çünkü onlarla omuz omuza çalışıyorum. Onlar da stratejik bir güce sahipler. Çünkü kadınlar toprağın hafızasını, yerel üretim bilgisini, aile beslenmesini, paylaşma kültürünü ve dayanışma ekonomisini taşıyorlar. Kadınlar kırsal kalkınmanın merkezinde yer almasıyla tarım güçleniyor, aile ekonomisi destekleniyor, çocukların eğitime erişiyor ve yerel kalkınma hızlanıyor. Kalkınmayı da artık sadece büyüme rakamlarıyla ölçemeyiz. Gerçek kalkınma dediğimiz zaman fırsat eşitliğiyle, emeğin karşılık bulmasıyla, adalet duygusuyla ve insanın kendini güvende hissetmesiyle anlam kazanıyor. Bu noktada insanlığın en ağır sınavlarından biri de şiddet. Bir insanın yaşam hakkını, özgürlüğünü, emeğini, dijital güvenliğini ve kamusal alandaki varlığını tehdit eden her türlü şiddet, hukuk devletinin, demokrasinin ve insanlığın ortak sorunu. Bu mücadele yalnızca yasalarla sınırlı kalamaz tabii ki. Eğitimle, veriyle, koruma mekanizmalarıyla, ekonomik güçlendirmeyle, dijital güvenlikle ve toplumsal bilinçle birlikte yürütülmesi gerekir. Bugün dünyaya yeni bir sorumluluk dili sunmamız gerekiyor. Parlamentolarda, yerel yönetimlerde, kabinelerde, diplomatik görevlerde, barış heyetlerinde, şirket yönetimlerinde, uluslararası kurumlarda daha adil ve güçlü bir temsil anlayışı sağlanmalı. Kız çocuklarının eğitimi ise küresel bir barış yatırımı olarak görülmeli. Çünkü bir kız çocuğunun eğitim alması gelecekte daha güçlü aileler, daha üretken ekonomiler, daha katılımcı demokrasiler ve daha barışçıl bir toplum anlamına geliyor. Buradan tabii gençlere de seslenmek istiyorum. Okuyun, üretin, sorun, araştırın. En önemlisi de hayal kurmaları, sorumluluk almaları. Onlar geleceğin mirasları değil, aslında geleceğin kurucuları. Eşitlik yalnızca kadınların değil, toplumun ortak sorumluluğu. Erkeklere de buradan bir ufak çağrı yapmak isterim. Bir baba kızının eğitim hakkını savunduğunda, bir yönetici çalışma hayatında adaleti güçlendirdiğinde, bir siyasetçi temsili arttırmak için sorumluluk aldığında toplum güçleniyor. Ben inanıyorum ki daha adil bir dünya kurabiliriz. Kız çocuklarının umutla büyüdüğü, hukukun insan onurunu koruduğu, eşit temsilin demokrasiyi güçlendirdiği bir gelecek mümkün. Yeter ki eşitliği ertelemeyelim. Yeter ki barışı, adaleti ve insan onurunu aynı kararlılıkla savunalım. Dünyanın geleceği korkunun yerine umudun, savaşın yerine barışın, eşitsizliğin yerine adaletin yükseldiği bir anlayışla kurulsun. Ve biz bu geleceği birlikte kurabiliriz. Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very warm and heartfelt welcome for the Honorable Mayor of Novo Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Honorable Benjamina Karic.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it's my pleasure and honor to greet you here in the beautiful city of Istanbul. Dear Mr. Hakan Saer, thank you for having us here. You are our inspiration, and we really appreciate all your efforts to organize 29 successful economic forums on behalf of the city of Sarajevo, municipality of Novo Sarajevo, and all our citizens. Thank you for opportunity to represent our work. Standing before you today, I speak not only as a public official, but also as a woman who carries both the honor and responsibility of being the first woman mayor in the history of Novo Sarajevo. This is not merely a personal milestone, it is a democratic signal. It tells us something fundamental, that democracy evolves when women enter spaces of power. Today, I want to reflect on democracy, women, and the future of peace, especially in a world where power increasingly rewrites law, and where rights that once seemed secure and are again negotiable. Democracy is often described as a system of laws, elections, and institutions, but in reality, today, democracy is a mirror of power. When power is concentrated, democracy becomes procedural. When power is inclusive, democracy becomes transformative. For decades, women were present in society but absent from decision-making. Laws were written by women, but rarely by women. Peace agreements were signed without women at the table. Budgets were adopted without considering women-lived realities. My election did not happen because the system was perfect. It happened because citizens demanded representation that reflects real life. And real life in Novo Sarajevo and across our country and across the world includes women leading households, rebuilding communities, and sustaining peace. History teaches us a difficult truth. When democratic standards decline, women's rights are among the first to be questioned, limited, or reversed. We see this globally. Reproductive rights framed as political bargaining tools, gender equality dismissed as secondary in times of crisis, violence against women minimized or normalized, and women leaders attacked not for their politics, but very often for their identity. This happens because women's rights challenge traditional power structures. They demand redistribution of authority in families, institutions, and states. From local government, I have learned this clearly. Legal equality on paper means little without concrete political courage to enforce it. Democracy must be defined and defended not only at national borders, but also on a local level, in municipalities, councils, schools, and homes. Peace is often discussed in terms of diplomacy and international agreements, but peace also is lived locally. It is lived in safe streets, accessible services, trust between institutions and citizens, and social justice with economic dignity. Local government is where democracy becomes tangible. Women's leadership at the local level changes priorities, focusing on prevention, then reaction, investing in education, in health and social cohesion, and building dialogue instead of division. Women leaders do not govern softly, they govern holistically. And that is exactly what sustainable peace requires. There is a persistent myth that women's participation disrupts established systems. The truth is actually totally opposite. Research and experience show that peace agreements involving women last longer. Institutions with women leaders are more transparent, and societies with gender equality are more resilient to conflict. Women do not weaken democracy, they complete democracy. Being the first woman mayor of Novo Sarajevo was not about replacing men. It was about expanding the idea of leadership. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice, and justice cannot exist without women's full participation. The future of peace will not be written only in capitals or constitutions. It will be written in communities by leaders who really understand complexity, care, and who have courage. In a world where power attempts to rewrite laws for narrow interests, women must not retreat from public life. We must claim space, shape policy, and protect democratic values. My journey is proof that change is possible, not symbolic change, but the structural change. Democracy survives when it listens. Peace lasts when it includes. And the future belongs to societies who are brave enough to trust women with power. Thank you once more. It was a pleasure to be here today with you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the president of the Diplomatic Club of Slovenia, Her Honorable Professor Dr. Maretka Kasner.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it's a great honor to speak to you today. And of course, thank you, Dr. Khan, to your invitation and to also be an ambassador of knowledge in my projects almost 10 years. Thank you very much. So my speak today is about a topic that is more important than ever in today's world: the role of diplomacy and the role of diplomatic clubs and their impact on cooperation in foreign policy within the global stage. My speech is focused on both gender, men and women. We live in a time when the world is becoming increasingly interconnected, yet also more complex. Global challenges such as climate change, migration, economic crisis, security issues, and technological development go beyond the borders of individual states. No country today can function entirely on its own. This is precisely why diplomacy remains one of the key tools of maintaining peace, stability, and international cooperation. We are living in a time of profound transformation. The global landscape is shifting economically, politically, and socially. The assumptions that guided international cooperation for decades are being tested. Globalization, once seen as an unstoppable force for integration and growth, is now increasingly questioned. Economic interdependence is being considered through the lessons of resilience, security, and strategic economy. The challenge today is that diplomacy must operate in faster, more polarized, and more public global environment. Social media, cyber warfare, misinformation, economic pressure, and geopolitical competition make negotiations more difficult than in previous decades. Of course, especially for all women too. The diplomatic clubs represents a space for dialogue, understanding, connections, and build bridges between different cultures, ideas, and political systems. And here, the women also need to be heard. One of the greatest effects of diplomatic clubs is the encouragement of international cooperation. Through decisions, diplomatic simulations, international projects, and partnership with foreign institutions, members gain the ability to listen, negotiate, and search for common solutions. These are fundamental values of successful foreign policy. Furthermore, diplomatic clubs contribute to shaping a new generation of responsible global citizens. Young people learn that diplomacy is not only about policies between states, but it's also about the art of mutual respect, cultural dialogue, and the shared pursuit of progress. In this evolving environment, the European Union finds itself at a critical juncture. The European Union has always been more than just an economic project. It is a community built on shared values, peace, democracy, solidarity, and the rule of law. These principles remains its strongest foundation even as the world around us changes. In the global sphere, cooperation is becoming increasingly valuable. Countries that invest in dialogue and international partnerships are often more successful in achieving economic growth, political stability, and greater influence in the world. That is why diplomatic clubs create an environment where the ideas of the future can grow and develop. Distinguished guests, diplomacy is not only the responsibility of politicians and ambassadors. Diplomacy begins with every individual who is willing to listen, understand, and cooperate. The diplomatic club is proof that young people, through the energy, knowledge, and openness, can make an important contribution to a more connected and peaceful world. Allow me to conclude with the thought that the future of international relations should not be based on competition, but on cooperation. Through dialogue, knowledge, and mutual respect, we can build a stronger global community for future generations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let us please welcome to the stage the Minister of Internally Displaced Persons of Lebanon from the years 2020 until 2021, distinguished member of the Advisory Board of the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy, the Honorable Professor Dr. Ghada Karim Atta.
Dr. Akan Suver, thank you very much for the invitation for the second time. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, my speech for today is titled From the Margins to the Table, Women, War, and the Future of Peace. Imagine a woman in a conflict zone. She wakes up not to stability, but to uncertainty. No safety, no electricity, no medicine. And yet, her day begins the same way. She provides, she cares, she holds everything together. Now, imagine that the war slows down, when discussions begin, when decisions are made about the future. She disappears from the room. Not because she lacks experience, but because the system was never designed to include her. This is not one woman's story. This is the reality of millions of women across conflict-affected regions today. Across the world, from America, Europe, to Eurasia, and beyond, we see a persistent pattern. In times of war, women step forward. In times of decision, they are pushed back. This is not anecdotal, it's systematic. Between 1992 and 2019, as cited by UN, women made up only 13% of negotiators and just 6% of mediators in major peace processes worldwide. At the same time, when women do participate, the impact is measurable. Peace agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. So, the issue is not capacity, the issue is exclusion. More than 2 decades ago, the international community acknowledged this reality through United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, calling for women's full participation in peace and security. But today, implementation remains uneven, fragile, and often selective. And also, in time of crisis, when power reshapes priorities, women's rights are among the first to be compromised. This creates a growing gap between legal commitments and lived realities, a gap that undermines not only gender equality, but the credibility of democracy itself. Because women's rights are not a secondary issue, they are a test of whether our systems truly function. Allow me now to move from the global to the personal. I come from Lebanon, a country navigating ongoing war, as you all know, unfortunately, economic collapse, political instability. In Lebanon, women are not absent from public life. They are central to it. They lead in healthcare, education, civil society, humanitarian action. They sustain communities through crisis. They contribute to diplomacy and are involved often behind the scenes in sensitive discussions related to regional stability, including matters involving Lebanon and Israel. As an example, they are present, active, and effective. And yet, when we look at formal political representation, the gap is striking. Regarding the government, the Lebanese women have not been constantly represented. The first, and so far, so only one time that women held 30% was during the cabinet where I have been, formed under President Hassan Diab, present with us today. And for the parliament, Lebanese parliament, today, out of 128 deputies, only 8 are women. Just 8, not more. This is not a reflection of competence. This is a reflection of structural barriers. For decades, Lebanese women's organizations had advocated for a minimum 30% quota in political representation, a demand first raised as early as 1999. But today, we must ask a broader question. If 30% is necessary in parliament, why doesn't it apply to peace negotiations? Why are women still excluded from most of the tables where the future is decided? Because peace is not only about ending conflict, it's about designing what comes next. And a future designed without women is inherently incomplete. And Lebanon is not an exception. It's a reflection of a wider global reality where women carry responsibility without being granted equal power. So the question before us is not whether women should be included. The question what will make inclusions irreversible. We need structural guarantees, not voluntary participation, accountability, not symbolic commitments, and political will that recognizes women as decision makers, not just contributors. The cost of political exclusion is not theoretical. Why? Because women's groups often push for community-level needs, education, healthcare, reconciliation, not just power sharing between elites. That builds deeper root for peace, and also a peace deal that includes diverse voices is more likely to be seen as fair. When women are excluded, it signals that the system is still unequal for future grievances. Peace without women is not sustainable peace. It's only a temporary silence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker in the panel of women is from the Association of World Citizens, ABD. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Claudia Huang.
Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to stand here. My name is Claudia Huang, a volunteer of VOPAL. Today, I will briefly reflect on conscience, transparency, and integrity in relation to the world economy and peace, drawing from my past and present work as well as my volunteer experiences. For the past 11 years, I served as a prosecutor, handling numerous criminal cases involving the protection of women and children, economy fraud, and the preservation of the natural environment. Dr. Hong, the president of VOPAL, reminded me of the importance of conscience. Take the protection of women and children as an example. Such cases often involve domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and child abuse. To undertake such cases is to safeguard the most vulnerable groups in society. As a prosecutor, it is essential to listen attentively to the both sides, the statement of both victim and defendants, and to use wisdom and conscience to clarify the fact and make appropriate decisions. Only by ensuring that fundamental human rights are not violated can we maintain the balance of justice. Dr. Hong of VOPAL hopes that every citizen, government official, and even head of state and representative of international organizations can follow their conscience and use their influence to make the right decisions. That's how peace can grow. Start small and expanding from the individual to communities and even between nations. As Dr. Hong once said, no love, no peace. Peace needs love, and love needs to be balanced. Real balance begins within ourselves. When we act from the heart and do things that truly benefit society, those acts of great love can inspire others to follow their own good deeds, creating a chain that connects individuals, societies, nations, and even international efforts. As a lawyer right now, I take part in tax and legal reform initiatives, promoting the protection of taxpayers' rights. Fairness and the transparency in tax system are not only matter of domestic law, but also reflection of fundamental human rights and justice. Governments must begin with integrity themselves so that people can trust their institution as transparent and reasonable. With proper guidance and protection, citizens are more willing to cooperate with government policies and regulations, creating a stable financial foundation for society. On the other hand, if trust in government is lost, social division, economy turmoil, and peace is difficult to sustain. Dr. Hong of For Power has advanced the Declaration on Transparency and Integrity, which states that transparency is the cornerstone of trust and collaboration, and integrity is the foundation of ethical conduct, reflecting sincerity, honesty, and accountability. Individual and organization alike must honor their commitment and live by moral principle to protect social justice. This principle explains the basic foundation for sustaining a nation's system. Putting them into practice reflects the conscience of national leaders and the institutional designers. World peace and economy are inseparable. The rise and the fall of the economy depends not only on government system, but also on the people who operate them. Whether government officials act with conscience and whether they design and apply systems with transparency and integrity determines the prosperity or decline of the nation's economy. When a country can safeguard human rights and establish a fair legal system, it can promote economic growth. A stable economy, in turn, builds trust among nations, reduces conflicts, and strengthens peace. I'm grateful that my work can be combined with my volunteer experience. My life is not just arguing in court or drafting law documents. It has also given me a deeper understanding of the importance of human rights and the human dignity. In my work, I'm able to apply my expertise and stay true to my value. I'm honored to be part of this important conference, which tied directly to the global economy and peace, and to play even a small role in moving peace forward. At a time when the war and economy turmoil are everywhere, I believe only fairness, transparency, and the respect for the human right can make economy sustainable and allow peace to last. Thank you for your attention. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do to close the panel is invite those ladies who are still here with us from the panel, if we could do a photo, just the women from the panel discussion. So Tasmina, you join us as well, please.